Well, hello there. Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as Simba's Twin, the Lion King, Part 5. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
First POV. I roared until my voice was gone. And by the end, I was completely refreshed. There was no anger inside me anymore, no adrenaline or the desire to kill something. I only felt peace and the cooling sensation of my body. It was like the calm you felt after an intense workout. The world seemed so gentle in that moment. The intensity and brutality of the battle made the normal world feel so kind. I took that moment to check on myself. I noticed that I was feeling mild aches in some places and I had sustained scratches and punctures on my skin, but there was no serious injury. I had flawlessly executed my plan. After I was done checking on myself, I looked around at my surroundings. The vultures that had flown overhead had landed on the ground. They numbered in the hundreds and were eating the corpses of the fallen kings. I stared at the scene for a while before I heard a flap of wings beside me. There was only one vulture in the world that would ever get this close to me. "You did it, my lord," Grim said as he landed beside me. "I did," I said with a smile, liking that short sentence very much. "How was the food?" "They tasted disgusting," he said. Grim had been spoiled with fresh and delicious meat for a year now, so he was picky. "But the chance of eating a king comes once in a lifetime, so I had to take a piece for myself," he said. I nodded at his words but remained silent. Meanwhile, I continued looking at the scene before me, my thoughts stretching into unimportant things. "Something wrong, my lord?" Grim asked with a tilt of his head. Just pondering on what Roku said in his final moments, I answered honestly, "That could be me in the future. Perhaps it would take a few years or a decade, but eventually, I will fall just like they." Grim widened his eyes a bit before turning to look at the scene before us. He looked at the vultures tearing and pecking away at the fallen kings with a new perspective in his eyes. Perhaps he imagined my body in their place, just like I was doing. "No," he said suddenly with surprising conviction. "No vultures or any other creature will disrespect you like that. I will make sure of it." I laughed out loud. "I am serious, my lord," Grim said. The resolve and conviction in his voice made my laugh die down. "Even if only time itself makes you fall, vultures can live twice as long as lions. A starving bird will not get your hair." I glanced at him, only noticing now that he was larger than any other vultures around. Maybe fulfilling his words was a stretch for a single bird, but his spirit alone was enough to move my heart. "Thank you, Grim," I said. "I am happy to serve," he replied. A short silence followed as we both reflect on our one-year journey. The first time I met him was vivid in my mind. And now here we are. So, I trailed thoughtfully, "What next?" I never really thought this far ahead in my plan. The end of all my plans and strategy was my ultimate victory against the Mbali brothers. I never really thought about what to do after my win. Of course, returning to the Pride Lands was part of my life goals, but that was still 1 year into the future according to my promise. So what should I do in the time before that? "I think this is the part where you mate with the females and have babies," Grim suggested in a not-so-sure voice. "And then, enjoy life, I guess." Becoming the king was the ultimate life goal for a lion. There could never be anything greater and more fulfilling than that. It meant that I had completed life as a lion. "Right," I nodded, "I have a pride now." I realized I wanted nothing but this all my life. I had prepared for years for this, but it still felt like it happened suddenly. I could never be ready for it. "I guess I should greet my new pride," I said, and then turned towards the direction of the pride. They were close by. They were close enough that I could smell them from here. And so I walked towards the location of the pride. Grim immediately took to the sky and flew towards the location before me so that he could scout and tell me again what to expect before I reached there. On my way, I gathered my thoughts for the task ahead instead of pondering about useless questions. I had no experience in taking over a pride, and the only example that I could look to was Scar's takeover of the pride. Which, I must admit, was anything but a good example or tradition. Scar's takeover of the pride was not because he earned it, but because there were no other lions to become king. This caused much resentment and dissatisfaction from the lionesses, and Scar had to starve us and forcefully make us submit to him. But it was different for me. I had earned the kingdom and the pride fair and square against 3 prime kings. There was no debate or doubt that I was the undisputed king. So I hoped for a seamless takeover where the Pride would accept me as their king without further conflict. But as I watched Grim return faster than I thought, I knew that my hope would not come to pass. If the vulture returned, it usually meant that something was not as it should be. "They are preparing to fight," Grim said, and he landed on my back. "A fight?" I asked. "For what purpose?" "I think they are trying to protect the cubs." 3 lionesses had moved further away from the Pride and were hiding the young cubs under a bush, he said. "And the rest?" "They are waiting for you," Grim said, "but they wait in a battle formation. They pick the tall grasses to meet you, where it is hard to keep an eye on all the adults. I believe they hope to sneak up on you in case things turn south," I hummed calmly in acknowledgement. In the meantime, I was trying to suppress a growing anger and annoyance by justifying their action. Of course, they would be wary of me from the start. But the sheer audacity to try to deny my claim on them, a claim I rightfully earned. It was hard to view that kindly. A low growl came out. They must think they are so clever, when in fact their actions speak otherwise. Grim said with a shake of his head before he jumped off my back and flew back into the sky. A few minutes of slow and deliberate steps later, I saw the lionesses waiting for me among the tall grasses just like Grim had told me. His other information also stayed true as the females stood in a formation. They stood in a semicircle where they could attack me from all sides as I approached them. The smell of the females was distinctive and I smelled more females than my eye could see, meaning some of them stayed hidden among the grass. "Is this how you greet your king?" I asked while I continued to approach them with absolutely zero hesitation. At my question, I saw the females looking towards the direction of the formation. I followed their gaze and locked eyes with 3 lionesses that stood at the very center of the formation. From the way the others looked at them for a reaction, I could tell that they were the leaders or, at the very least, the females at the top of the Pride hierarchy. So I made my way towards them. "Forgive us for being wary of the new king we barely know," one of them said with barely hidden sarcasm. But I didn't take it the wrong way. Not at all. How could I, when I knew that each and every one of them was completely terrified? The sarcasm was a cheap attempt at hiding her fear. They were so scared that it didn't even make sense. The growing anger and annoyance disappeared and were replaced by confusion. I was not the villain here. Was I? Oh wait, I just brutally murdered their 3 kings. Maybe I was a villain from their perspective. Like Scar's takeover, but worse. Oh. I was so much worse in that context. Interesting. Then let us quickly get familiar with ourselves. "Tell me your names," I asked and finally stood before them. Females were small. They were noticeably smaller compared to the average lion, and standing before me, they were barely half my size. I felt like I could tear them up and murder them by accident. The females swallowed hard, hoping they could hide the slight tremble of their legs among the grass, but I noticed. "My name is Esh," the lioness in front of me said. "My name is Ishiba," the one standing left to Esh said. "Nydia," the one standing on the right said. "My name is Salima," another one said, and that was when I stopped them. "That is enough for now, I can't remember all of you at once, so let's do it step by step," I said. Those 4 were important names as they were the highest ranking among the Pride. The rest of the Pride, I could learn their names at a later time. I moved away from them and walked along their curved formation. I also spotted the few lionesses crouching down and hiding under the tall grasses. I strode back and forth until I inspected every last one of them. A total of 15 females were present at that moment, including 2 subadults. But I knew that that was only half of the members of the Siranjet Pride. "My name is Leo, son of King Mufasa," I said, a bit surprised that I mentioned Mufasa when I introduced myself. Perhaps I wanted them to know of my royal lineage. "And I am your new king," I said, and finally stopped near the 4 females again. "Now, where is the rest of my Pride?" I asked, and some flinched back due to my rising tone. "And where are the cubs?" The air chilled in that moment. My instincts tugged at me. There was a nature in me, the nature of a lion that raged at the mere mention of cubs of another lion. I guess this was what would make me kill them. The females rolled their shoulders and their teeth were half-bared. I could feel them loading up their muscles, ready to spring out at any moment. My voice cut through the tension easily due to the fact that I did not give a damn about what they were about to do. They truly pose no threat to me. "Think carefully about your next action," I said, and a deep growl rolled off my throat and spread around like an earthquake. I flashed my fangs with a twitch of my lips. These were the same teeth that were still red from the blood of their kings. A heavy silence hung in the air. I could hear their quickening heartbeats. Eventually, some of the females broke under the pressure. I noticed that most of them were either young or on the older side. They came to me with slow steps and lowered heads. They broke the battle formation and took their place beside me. I grinned when I saw the face of betrayal flash on the lionesses that remained in their place. I guess I knew which ones were mothers and which were not. The same thing happened when Scar tried to kill the cubs after his takeover. The lionesses with cubs fought to the bitter end, while the ones without cubs were the easiest to fold and adapt to the new rule. The others are staying behind those trees and near the bushes, one of the lionesses who came beside me said. I turned to her and remembered her scent and face. She looked young, almost too young. I assumed she was still a subadult, one that had not borne cubs. This one is wise beyond her years, I said with a chuckle, and then moved towards the said location. I already knew where it was, but I appreciated her willingness to cooperate. Grim was already circling above the place, so it could not be missed. I walked right past the formation, and no one could do anything. I had already intimidated them and made nearly half of them join my side. The location was not far away, so in a few seconds, I could already see the lions trying their best to lie low behind the trees and among the grass. I caught a glimpse of males with half a mane and small cubs that were too curious for their own good. I roared at them. Specifically, I roared at the 4 young males. When said young lions did not run immediately after my first roar, I charged at them. It seemed I was not fully done with fighting. I still had some young bloods to kill or some more to kick out of the pride. Third POV. He was big. He was so awfully big that you could not think of anything else in his presence. He filled the entire space, including the physical and the mental space. There was no room for anything else before him. He stood bigger than Baraka, perhaps by a few 20 or 30 kilograms. But the stark difference in their presence made it seem like Leo was triple the size of Baraka. Baraka, although a huge lion, felt like a lion and looked possible. Leo, on the other hand, felt like something beyond a simple lion, and he looked impossible and supernatural. Perhaps that was the difference between the weight of fat and the weight of clean muscle. It was akin to a normal guy seeing Arnold for the first time and thinking, are we even the same species? Is he real? And the lionesses wished it just ended there. But there was also another thing that made Leo feel unreal and impossible. The new king had no tail. A tail was important for the balance of lions, we've said this a million times. But another vital function of the tail was communication. Animals could communicate through talking, but even more than that, they communicated also with their body language. And without a tail, it was almost impossible to read Leo's body language. He was absolutely stoic, they could never tell his mood or his intention by just looking. It was also what made him look like a different beast to them, a scarier beast. A tail with a twitching tip showed the king was agitated. Low and still meant peace and calm. A tail lashing from side to side indicated aggression. A quick flick of the tail was a warning for females. Slow movement meant the king was pleased, etc. All these subtle tells of a king were nowhere to be seen on Leo. That caused the females to look for other tells on his body. They stared at his body, his shoulder that looked like vines wrapped around them when he moved, his paws that were big enough to cover their faces, and the long, curved claws that had torn even giants like buffalo. And when they looked at his face for those tells, they were greeted with a powerful jaw lined with rows of razor-sharp teeth. His mane was thick and dark, causing them to feel small, and some even lost themselves and admired it halfway. Leo was hard to read, and upon trying to do so, it only left them with more fear and awe. The members of the Pride were feeling conflicted. They thought they would have a chance since Leo just had an intense fight with the 3 kings. They thought they would be able to save the cubs for at least a day, if not a week. But it had never felt easier to submit to a lion. And indeed, half of them submitted to Leo upon their first encounter. He was simply dominant in a way that he managed to fill the void left by 3 kings and more. Lionesses could tell how strong and how worthy a king was, and all their instincts screamed that Leo had no equal. But even so, some managed to hold themselves back. They gathered courage amid the feeling of weakness and despair and stood against him still. Leo charged at the location of their cubs, and that finally lit the fuse to the lionesses that were ready to protect them. The nature of female lions might be to submit, but that of a mother is to protect the cub no matter the cost. No. Nydia roared and led the charge. 7 lionesses followed behind her as they ran towards Leo from the back. A loud screeching mixed with vulgar caws came from the sky. It was the lone vulture that always followed Leo. Their new king came to a complete stop at the sound. Then he turned to them with furious eyes. Some of the lionesses nearly tripped when they saw that. Leo's mane puffed out in rage, making him look more monstrous than he already was. And then he changed direction. Instead of going for the group of lions not far in front of him, he ran back towards them. "Don't hesitate now!" Esh roared, and then 8 lionesses collided with Leo in a display of raw animalistic violence. But things went very differently from what they imagined. It was not an equal fight, not even for the tiniest, smallest, and most insignificant fraction of a millisecond. There was no fight. It was like the lionesses came to Leo for discipline and to get a reality check. Perhaps the 3 kings led by Baraka had been too kind and gentle with the females that they forgot the sheer brutality of a lion. Leo lunged forward with his hind legs, and he delivered one powerful swing at the head of an incoming female. It sounded like a grenade went off as his paw smashed the head so violently that it nearly popped. Leo did not clench his paw or unsheath his claws, and that was the only reason why the female lived. But she still went into shock. Her body shut down completely as if Leo had knocked her soul right out of her body, and she crashed to the ground like a dead statue. She urinated on herself and never got up again during the fight. And that was only the first attack of the battle. 3 lionesses slammed into Leo's body. He was big and wide enough that many females could attack at the same time, but that didn't help at all. 3 females could not force the king to take a single step back. Instead, they folded like a pretzel when he pushed back with a roar. Leo became a blur of muscle and fury. The 3 lionesses were ragdolled and pinned to the ground. The sound of jaws snapping shut right beside their head or neck was a warning of what could have been. It was not a clash of 2 forces. They were not equal. Leo won the moment he made a move. The moment he tired, the females crumbled. Esh and Nydia flanked Leo from both sides while he took down the 3 lionesses. It would have been over instantly if he went for the kill, but since he did have such intention, suppressing the lionesses took a few seconds. Nydia took that opportunity and jumped at Leo, her claws unsheathed and her fangs bared. The same lunges had taken down Wildebeest with ease and efficiency, so she was hoping to deal damage to Leo. But Leo reacted in time. He was not new to being ganged up on. In fact, most of his life, he fought more than one enemy while he always fought alone. So, who did these females think they were? Leo taught Nydia the endless gap between a wildebeest and an apex predator. He grabbed her midair, and before she could even understand what was going on, the world blurred, and she was upside down. After that, she felt pain erupt from her back as she crashed into Esh, who was also lunging at Leo from the opposite side. Leo had grabbed her and used her as a weapon to smash Esh. They both fell on the ground, and they released agonizing whimpers upon their fall. Leo had not been so gentle with them in particular. And before they could catch even a single thought or emotion, Leo was onto them again. Nydia's world went dark as his jaw nearly swallowed her whole head. But then the jaw showed mercy and clamped down on her nape instead of crushing her skull. Nydia screamed as she felt herself thrown into the air. It was violent, so quick, and so powerful. She was launched into the air as if a buffalo got to her and not a fellow lion. When she crashed back down on the ground, she felt her world blur, and the thought of getting back up never crossed her mind again. A deep growl like mountains grinding together could be heard as Leo went on a controlled rampage against the 8 lionesses. The difference between them was so significant that 100 of them would likely not stand a chance. He was so much bigger, stronger, faster, more lethal, and more explosive. He was a living weapon, while they were just big cats. For reference, an average lion, not at the level of the Mbali brothers, could take on 3 females and dominate them fairly easily. And Leo could kill 3 lions however he wants. By that logic, Leo would not have any trouble dealing with 9 lionesses, and there were only 8 of them. Their odds were truly laughable from the start. By the end of the onslaught, all females lay on the ground. Most of them were trembling and showing their exposed belly to display full submission to the new king. The stench of urine filled the air as the lionesses had completely lost their bodies to fear and peed themselves. But Leo seemed to only get more excited and mad at the smell. 18 females are too much for a single lion to handle, so I am not awfully concerned if some of you die to set an example, Leo said, his voice deep and burly. Normally, a new king would not hurt the females because they are valuable resources. They would not even hurt them to mate with them if they didn't want to. Instead, they would kill the cubs and wait for them to go into heat and mate with their consent. The females were the engine of the pride. Hurting them would be akin to destroying your dream car after saving up for years to buy it. But in the case of Leo, his words held weight. There were too many lionesses for a single lion to maintain, and he truly could not care if some of them died. That's how they saw the situation. Nydia felt a shiver run through her spine. She had never felt so weak or vulnerable before. The love of a mother was strong, but the desire to survive was stronger for animals. "Do not try anything again," Leo said, and then he moved towards the cubs once more. This time, nothing stopped him. The 3 young females who were staying to protect the cubs immediately moved away. They did not run. They simply backed away with lowered heads and exposed the 10 or so cubs to the new king to do as he pleased. The newly defeated females could do nothing but remain in their place and watch helplessly. The cries of the young cubs fell on hearing ears but unmoving bodies. "Mom. Aunt Esh. No." And there were some cubs too young to even speak. They only released whining sounds that were akin to tiny cat sounds. In the end, power was supreme. The females were forced to accept their new king. Their own desire did not matter in front of the king. Some cried, most looked away. First POV. "Greetings, young cubs," I said while towering over the helpless cubs. My shadow cast darkness on them, making them back away in fear. The younger cubs cried out and whined in small voices. The older ones stepped forward with droopy ears and tails between their legs. They were gripped by fear, but they still stood protectively over the younger ones. The chaotic conflict that happened right before their eyes had traumatized them. I could see that much from their eyes. They likely knew what was coming next for them, and it was amusing to see how they dealt with the impending doom. On another note, the cubs were absolutely adorable. I've said this before in the past, but a baby lion was perhaps one of the cutest things in the animal kingdom. They were no different than a kitten with bigger paws and cuter fur. They were so cute that I could not help but spoil my half-brothers back in the Pride Lands, even though they were the offspring of Scar. But things were a little complicated now. I was the king of the pride, and nature demands that I kill these cubs so that I can sire my own and pass on my genes as quickly as possible. As a lion, I was completely repulsed by their existence. The mere thought of feeding these little cubs and raising them with effort, even though they were not my own and were my enemies, was a disgusting idea. The ultimate beta move for a lion. But on the other hand, I was not just a lion, was I? I still retained my humanity. It was the sole thing that made me special and what had carried me so far. And you know what? I still had enough humanity in me not to kill children. The cubs should not be judged by their fathers. My ever-growing ego protested at the idea. Who cares about morals when my ego was hurt, right? That was the most important thing for a lion. But that same hurt ego quickly died down when I thought of it this way. Scar tried to kill me and he killed all the male cubs when he took over the pride. Would I really allow myself to stoop to his level and do what he did? Hell no. And all the reasons why I should kill them did not apply to me. I was already the strongest while being young, and still had room to grow. I would rule for a long time, unlike other lions whose rule was unstable, so I didn't need to hurry to pass on my genes. I did not fear that these cubs would grow up to be a threat. I was too big and powerful for these things to matter. In short, I was strong enough to be gentle. "You don't need to be afraid," I said, trying to sound gentle with my deep voice. "Just know that I am your king from now on and you should address me as such." They blinked owlishly, still afraid, but cubs had this way of reading someone's intention very well. They knew immediately that I truly meant no harm. "Do you understand?" I asked again. "Why, wise?" "Yes, my lord," some of the cubs replied with a stutter, and I was satisfied with that. "Now go on, return to your mothers and tell them never to cross the king next time," I said. The cubs slowly moved while watching me intently. Their droopy ears perked back up, their tails wagging as their nose twitched to remember the scent of their new king. They carefully escaped under me and after that, they sprinted towards their mother as fast as they could. I chuckled seeing some of them trip on their own legs while running. I remembered how difficult it was to coordinate my body properly when I was a cub like them. I had to train extensively to get good control of my own body. The lionesses widened their eyes in disbelief, but none of them stood up to greet their cubs. They remained in their lying position, for I was still watching them and had not given them permission to rise. They closed their eyes and kissed the cubs with their muzzle when they reached them. Some of the older cubs walked around the lionesses and checked their mothers for injuries before slipping into their arms for a warm embrace. The reunion was quite heartwarming. It almost made me forget my agitation at the females for daring to attack me. The lionesses like Nydia and Esh sent a curious gaze towards me. They didn't have enough courage to look at me for long, though, as they pulled away only after 3 seconds. They looked almost ashamed of their previous action. Well, they should be. In fact, they should be double ashamed because they did 2 stupid things. One was for thinking they stood even the smallest chance against me, and another was assuming the worst of me. Although in their defense, I really did not help with their assumption. I was still really shitty at this whole managing pride thing. Which was precisely why I looked past the previous attack and did not harm anyone. I had hoped that my sheer aura and the fact that I won my crown in a fair battle would be enough to make them submit to me immediately, but I guess that wouldn't be the case. I would have to put in some more work until they submit to my rule. Now you might be asking why I fought the females in the first place, even though I was planning to spare the cubs all along. The answer was quite simple. It was to send a message. I wanted them to know I spared the cubs' lives. I did not want them to live in the delusion that they protected their cubs and forced me to spare them. It was my choice to let them live. It was my decision, my kindness and mercy. It was nothing they earned or something they accomplished. It might seem similar since they both have the same results, but the two could not have been more different. One made me look weak and the other showed I had morality. I turned around after that and looked at the 3 young females who had stayed with the cubs and were lowering their heads in fear. "Go join the others," I said, and they slipped past me to join the other members of the pride. The defeated females finally had the courage to rise from the ground. The ones that decided to submit from the start also came to join them, and they all stayed together in one place. And finally, I turned to the final task at hand. The 4 subadult males were hiding and lying low among the grasses. They were hoping I would ignore them, but their presence was impossible to miss. I growled deeply and then made my way towards them. I was not running, but I quickened my pace as I approached them. My heartbeat doubled in rate, and my body began heating up, ready for battle. The countless fights I had with other lions engraved a memory on my body. I could switch into battle mode in seconds without having to taste the start of a battle. But the closer I got to the 4 males, the more I realized that they were absolutely of no threat to me. They remained in their place, but not because they were going to stand their ground. It was because they were too afraid to even move away. They lowered their front body and crawled backwards as I got close to them. Finally, they rolled over and showed their belly when I reached them. The softest, most zesty, and gay growls left their throat as they showed their most vulnerable parts to me. It was the ultimate display of submission. I walked around them a few times, trying to see if they had some fight in them or if one of them was bloodlusted. But I found nothing. I only saw fear and panic on their faces. It was honestly disappointing. I was already throwing hands with Scar and fighting a clan of 100 hyenas when I was their age. But I guess it was not fair to compare other lions to me. Still, I was expecting a little pride, or a little resistance. No, they had none. They submit completely and utterly. I could kill them now before they turned into possible threats, but that would just be shameful on my part. It would be like killing a weak, pregnant lady when they were so harmless and showing their vulnerable part. To sum it up, they were not worth killing. "Leave," I commanded them. "Leave the Serengeti and never show yourself again. The moment I see you again, I will consider you a challenger and kill you on the spot." The lions rolled back to their paws and ran away from me as quickly as possible. I watched them disappear in the tree leans, and then I looked up at Grim, who was flying in the sky. I did not have to give the order. My loyal bird knew what to do. He followed behind the 4 males immediately to check whether they truly left the kingdom or if they stayed behind and were planning their revenge. I released a sigh after that and finally collapsed among the grass. "It's been a long day," I said to myself, hidden in the tall grass. "A lot of things have happened today, and that weighs heavily not only on my body but also on my mind and spirit." I lay there for a while, perhaps around half an hour. My brief rest ended when Grim returned and landed beside me. They are heading straight towards the Masai Mara without stopping. "I don't think they are planning anything. They truly fear you," Grim said. I hummed in acknowledgement. And then finally, I stood back up again. My body felt heavier than when I first lay down to rest. I felt more sluggish and tired after giving my body time to rest. I need to eat, I said, and then walked back towards the place where I fought the Mbali brothers. This was because the buffalo carcass still remained there. Oh, I nearly forgot, I said, and turned towards the Siranjet pride. I was not alone anymore, I had a pride to lead. Roar. I roared towards them. It was not a warning or a declaration of rule. The roar was a command that told them to follow me. The pride, now 28 members in total, followed behind me. They did not come too close, but they still followed right behind me. I saw some of the females limping, perhaps due to my mauling or the buffalo hunt. They really needed food as well, since I have starved them for a week now. Nearly another half an hour later, we finally reached the shore of the lake where the battle once took place. But this time, the corpses of the kings were nowhere to be seen. They had been torn apart by the vultures and by other scavengers and taken away to different places, in different pieces, by different animals. Their scent and blood still lingered, but only faintly. I stared towards the buffalo carcass that the pride had taken down. It was in perfect condition. Many vultures were sitting around it, and some even perched on top, but none had taken a single piece. In fact, the vultures were actually chasing away the foxes and jackals that tried to take nibbles at the buffalo. I smiled, very pleased at their action. I walked to the buffalo and began eating after settling near its stomach. I opened up the insides and feasted on the cool organs. The pride watched me from afar. They were starving, but no one tried to come and eat the meal with me. So in the end, I had to invite them. Come, there is plenty for everyone, I said, and one by one they came. The lionesses that submitted to me in the beginning were the first ones to come. The ones that attacked me were the last, and even when they came, they ate timidly. But I couldn't care less about any of that. In fact, I could not even care enough to eat anymore. A wave of nostalgia hit me and buried all other feelings in my heart. I remembered when I was a cub, the way Mufasa and his pride would eat during feeding time. I remembered how much I admired my father and how I wanted to be a king one day. I could almost taste my resolve and ambition from back then. Now that moment was here. Strange. So very strange, I had grown. Things were awkward. On my part, I suddenly had a bunch of strangers under my care and guidance. On their part, they had to obey and live under the rule of a new king who literally just slaughtered their old kings. Nature really had a sick sense of humor. It took us a little over 2 hours to finish the whole buffalo, during which no member of the pride interacted with me. They stubbornly stayed on their side, none came to lay beside me and feed. I lay in front of the soft belly of the buffalo and feed on the organs while they stay opposite to me and ate from the back and ribs of the buffalo. Their body language was the same as the zebras drinking from the lake where crocodiles live. They were timid and alert. They kept an eye on every little movement I made. If I breathed too hard, they're ready to back away. I feel like they were just overreacting. No way I was that scary, right? Right. Grim just shrugged his shoulders when I gave him a look, as if to say, "Hey, I understand them. You are pretty terrifying." We finished the buffalo in one sitting. It was strangely satisfying to watch the lions eat every bit of the buffalo instead of wasting most of it to the scavengers. It was late in the afternoon when we were done. The sun was lowering in the sky. It had not changed its color, but you could tell from the rays that it was about to disappear soon. The lions moved away from the muddy shore and settled in the dry lands where they could retain heat better. They yawned with full bellies. It was their first meal in over a week, so you could hear satisfied moans even though something horrible just happened to them a few hours before. Time. That was the thing we needed. I could not force the takeover of the pride. It was a mental thing now, and my constant presence would soon make them submit willingly. I knew I would be a better king than the Mbali brothers ever hoped to be. I moved towards the center of the pride and lay there to rest. The younger females and the ones who were eager to earn the favor of the new king immediately came over and chose to rest beside me. I'd seen the same thing happen with Scar's takeover. There were always some females who were not satisfied with the position they had with the old kings, so a new king meant a new opportunity to increase their status in the pride. I yawned and went to sleep after that, making sure the whole pride could feel my presence, smell my scent and hear my snores. They would have to get used to me as soon as possible. It was not even sunset, but exhaustion made it easy to fall asleep. And I slept like a baby. It must have seemed like a bold move from the female's perspective, the sheer confidence for a new male to sleep so deeply with his new pride. But I was just reassured by the fact that if anything were to happen, Grim would inform me instantly. The next day. Due to the fact that I slept so early, I was able to wake up before dawn. It was one of the darkest time of the day, so the stars seemed especially bright in the sky. The land, on the other hand, was a sea of blackness. Most animals were completely blind during this time, but I was not. Lions have great night vision built into their eyes like most felines, so I was able to see surprisingly well in that darkness. And at this moment, I decided to set out to hunt. My body was sore all over and my muscles ached, protesting all my movements. I also suffered minor wounds on my body, and those hissed in pain whenever a cold breeze hit them. I was in enough discomfort to bring any lion down and make him refuse to move again for at least a few days. But all these pains were normal to me. The moments when I woke up with no pain were rare due to my constant training and hunting. So I had learned to perform despite any discomfort. My movement woke up most members of the pride since I was sleeping at the center. They perked up with confused eyes, but most were too afraid to question me still. Until finally, one female asked, "Where are you going, my lord?" "Hunting," I replied simply, and my answer seemed to confuse them even more. First of all, I was not supposed to hunt. That was the job and duty of the lionesses. The king could live in comfort, and his main duty was to rule, mate, and protect the pride when danger presents itself. Secondly, we ate a whole buffalo yesterday. Why was I hunting again right after eating such a hefty meal? The answer to these questions was obvious to me, but they might as well have been unthinkable for the other lions. I was not going to gorge myself in comfort and allow myself to deteriorate like Scar or the other kings. I would continue hunting prey. Even if I didn't have to hunt for food, I would hunt for glory and sport, targeting buffalo or other bigger prey. I would continue training and sharpening my skills until the end of my days. I wouldn't stop growing. Also, it was correct that I was full from yesterday's meal, but when have I ever stopped eating just because I was full? Ever since I was a cub, I always ate beyond what my own body was capable of. I did this to grow, and it has worked so far. A buffalo was a huge prey, but when it was shared by 28 lions, I could not eat as much as I wanted. I was full, but I did not meet my usual standard of diet. I needed to hunt another one. I did not give all these answers upon their confusion. They would find out later on by themselves. In the meantime, another female said, "We should help you." "No need, just stay close and heed my summons," I said and left them. I followed the usual routine. At nighttime, vultures could not see well, so Grim was of no use for scouting, and I had to do everything by myself. But my natural night vision more than made up for it. I went to the giant herd of buffalo and targeted the one who was sleeping and the most isolated from the herd. I picked a juvenile bull, not young enough to stay with the mother but still not old enough to be considered fully grown. I was not in the best of condition at the moment and therefore did not want to target a prime bull. Not to misunderstand, though, I could take on a full-grown bachelor even at my current state, but that would come at the cost of further trauma on my body, so I wanted to avoid that. The hunt took an hour in total, scouting, stalking, attacking and then killing. The juvenile was sleeping with 4 limbs under his belly. I embraced him with my claws and clamped down on his throat. I blocked his airway and windpipe. He could not scream out, it was a silent death. He thrashed around as hard as he could, but the sound of his struggle was not loud enough to alert the other buffalo. The sun rose not long after I finished hunting. I was panting and sitting on top of the dead juvenile when the rays of the sun hit me. The other buffalo immediately got up when they saw the scene. They bellowed loudly, and that woke up the rest of the herd. When words got out that I was there, the whole herd promptly moved away. At this point, they had accepted me as their predator. They could probably ragdoll me if 2 or more decided to fight together, but it was the herd mentality. They did not try and fight for the dead bull and instead, they ran to their own safety. I roared into the sky after the hunt. It was not the kind of roar meant to fend off challengers, but the one that was meant to summon the members of my pride. The pride came toward the kill not long after. Their eyes widened and they did not know how to react upon seeing the buffalo I just killed. They were not hungry either, so they were not sure what to do. They lingered a few meters away, circling around while they whispered among each other. He was able to kill that buffalo alone even though he just fought the old kings yesterday, Tala, or so I remembered, said while looking at me with these lively eyes. I watched it happen, it was effortless, the lioness beside her commented. It was no use whispering with a lion's great senses. I could hear them all but chose to ignore most of them. I knew just how strange and out of the ordinary I was compared to other lions. They would have to adjust to me in the coming days. After they had gathered, I began eating the buffalo alone. They stayed a few meters away, lying and sitting now as I ate as much as my body could digest. They were studying me, they were learning my patterns, my behaviors, my character and my instincts. And I let them do so. After I was done eating as much as I could, a chunk of meat was missing from the carcass. But overall, the buffalo was mostly intact. I reckoned there was still more than 600 kilograms left. I sank my teeth on the side belly of the buffalo and with a powerful tug, I tore off a huge portion of the ribs and the surrounding muscles. This part of the buffalo was the softest and the easiest to chew. I walked towards the pride and then sat the meat down on the ground. I huffed, "This is for the cubs." I remember how I used to fight for leftovers while feeding when I was a cub. I would not allow that to happen here. There should be a separate meal for the cubs so that they could grow to their full potential. Most of the cubs would grow up to be members of the pride, so their growth was beneficial to me. They were also the last cubs of the Mbali brothers and carry great genes. I would want those to be passed down onto my cubs. The male cubs, on the other hand, I could tolerate them. They would carry the legacy of their father, and letting them live will be my last show of respect to the old kings. And the rest of you, go finish the buffalo, I commanded them. They were weak, so weak that it was not even funny. I could not have such weaklings in my pride. I would have to help them grow and make them stronger than they already were. Especially since I would eventually lead this pride back to my home to wage a war against Scar and his clan of hyenas. The females did not object. They promptly went to the buffalo and began nibbling on the meal. "Force it down if you must, I don't want to see any remains." The hard part was over. The challenge that came next was a bit more tedious and required patience. Ruling a kingdom and managing a pride. Third POV. The Pride Lands. The golden grasses of the Pride Lands swayed less than usual today. A dusty stillness hung over the land, the first true sign of the incoming drought that would last for years and leave the kingdom bare. Patches of cracked earth lay exposed between thinning vegetation, and every paw step kicked up fine sand that clung to fur and throat. The Pride Lands did not have dry seasons, so those were concerning sights for the experienced animals. Sarabi crouched low near a sloping dune, her seasoned eyes locked onto the scattered wildebeest herd in the distance. Serafina was not far from her. She was observing the herd as well, but was more focused on the sound. Her ears twitched frequently. They were stalking side by side, working as a team. Sarabi was focused solely on sight. Meanwhile, Serafina was making sure they stayed quiet by listening to the tiniest sound. When one of them felt something was wrong with their specific senses, they stopped together. It was the kind of teamwork that could only happen after years of hunting together. Flanking the herd from the opposite side were two younger lionesses. Their lean and lithe bodies were brimming with youthful energy. Both were working together nearly as well as the two older lionesses. Zuri and Nala were both 3 years old now. They were just about reaching their sexual maturity, and yet they were already one of the best hunters the pride had to offer. Lastly, Tiara was stalking from behind the herd. She was careful to stay downwind, and she was going to be the main chaser of this hunt. The 5 lionesses worked together like a machine, each of them playing important parts to make this hunt successful. After stalking for a few more minutes, Sarabi gave a flick of her tail, and that was the signal to start the chase. All of them exploded out like living missiles. They fanned out, guiding the herd of wildebeest so that they could pick out the most suitable target for the hunt. The chase lasted for a few seconds. The hooves of the prey galloped across the savannah, and among them, one younger wildebeest was slower than the others. It lagged just a few steps behind the rest of the herd, and that was all the hunters needed. Zuri surged forward. Now they were not controlling the herd but singling out the lone wildebeest. She was like an arrow shooting out of a bow. Nala followed right behind her. She was not any slower than Zuri, and they both sprinted towards the wildebeest whose fate was getting sealed. A heavy breath, a scream, and a moo. The wildebeest turned back, and it saw them too late. Zuri came flying with muscle and claw. The wildebeest veered right, but Nala was already on that side. The prey slammed shoulders with the young lioness and promptly lost balance. Zuri crashed down on the back of the wildebeest and latched on tightly. Her claws sank into the hide of the prey, and her teeth hooked onto flesh. With her weight on its back and the pain sending signals through its body, the wildebeest slowed down. Nala leapt at it from the side, biting down on its neck instantly. This time, the wildebeest finally stopped completely. It tried to struggle with its last strength, but by then, Sarabi and Serafina were there. The experienced hunters ended the wildebeest in mere seconds. It collapsed in a cloud of dry earth and silence, becoming a source of sustenance for the pride. Zuri released her tight hold on the prey as she stood on top of its fallen form. She watched with concerned eyes as the other wildebeest did not stop and continued running to the end of the horizon. They left a cloud of dust in their trail. Will we ever see them again? Zuri asked. That would have been outrageous only a year before. Animals in the Pride Lands did not migrate due to its evergreen and lush vegetation. Herd animals thrived, and so did every other creature under the sun. But starting from this year, the rainfall had stopped and became rare. The Pride Lands was getting drier and drier. And with the dying land, the herds did not migrate but leave, never to return again. It had been a slow process, but as the year rolled by, the land was getting visibly yellow and the prey were increasingly rare. Now it was a cause for celebration to see a small herd here and there. Of course we will see them again, Zuri, Nala said, but her tone was hopeful. All the hunters gathered around the kill and Zuri promptly came down from the fallen prey. They walked around the carcass, sniffing and poking to make sure the animal was dead, but no one dared eat the prey. Should we take a bite? Nala asked after getting impatient. Don't even think about it, Nala. Serafina was quick to warn her with a serious face. What? Why? We are the ones who killed it. Why does the king have to eat our hard-earned meal? Nala asked with an annoyed snarl. Because, as you said, he is the king. His job is not to hunt prey but to protect us, Sarabi said, her tone equally dead and serious. It was rare to see her smile these days. She had become a grumpy old lioness. You don't even believe what you said, Nala argued. And protect us from whom? The Pride Lands do not have any other male lion to challenge him. If it did, he would never even be king. Scar was only king because he was the only lion, not because he earned it. That is quite enough from you. Stop before you say too much, Serafina scolded her daughter while glancing at Tiara. The fifth lion among them was not a close friend and might whisper unwanted things to the king. No way. You agree with me, don't you, Zuri? Nala turned to her best friend for help. Zuri stayed silent and only stared at her for a long time. And then she said, Scar might not have earned the throne through fighting, but he did earn it by surviving. And he is the only thing protecting us from the hyenas, she added. Throughout the years, the hyenas have thrived and multiplied. I'm afraid if not for Scar, they could take the Pride Lands for themselves now, and we won't be able to do anything about it. It will be the kingdom of hyenas, not lions, she said. Her words were measured. Even though she said all these things, there was a cold detachment to her words. Like what she said did not matter to her, not even for a single moment. Like she was commenting on an irrelevant fictional story. Nala groaned in disappointment. Feeling like she was the only one in the world with a sane mind and everyone had been brainwashed by Scar and his rule. Zuri continued looking at her. She felt for her friend, but she could not force herself to care. She could not find it in her to be rebellious like that. What was the point? But at the same time, she had not accepted her situation like Sarabi or Serafina. The reason she was acting like that was because she remembered something. It felt like she was the only one who remembered the promise. Leo. He would come back in 2 years. He promised he would. And for all she was worth, Zuri believed it. There was no doubt in her mind. So what was the use of being rebellious during that time? She would not achieve anything by herself anyway. Instead, she was waiting for the right moment. She was waiting for his return, and then she would rebel. Until then, Leo needed her safe. He needed her strong. And that was what she was going to do. She gazed into the horizon, wondering if he was doing the same at that moment. How far was he really? Was he somewhere she could find him if she tried? Was he healthy? Was he bigger now? Stronger now? Was he still kind? Was he still the kind of lion that would bring home food to the cubs of his enemy? Roar. Zuri was brought out of her thoughts by Scar's roar. The roar was weak and had no substance to it, but it demanded everything. All 5 lionesses turned towards the sound and quickly moved away from the wildebeest. Not long after, Scar strode forward, carrying himself like a king. Behind him, the rest of the pride followed. Good job, Sarabi. Scar praised in a flat tone the leader of the hunting party. Sarabi bowed slightly to acknowledge the hollow praise. Scar. The king of the Pride Lands had no regality or dignity on him. Not to say he had such things before, but he looked even worse than he did in the past. Although a year had passed, the beatdown he suffered from Leo was still present. His mane was rugged and some parts no longer had for due to scars from Leo's bite. One of his eyes was gone, leaving it gaping slightly with rotten-looking flesh. There was a limp in his walk as he had a visible lost chunk of meat on his hind legs. It was the place Leo had bitten off while Scar ran away for his life. Scar was bigger than he was before and his body was no longer too fat, which showed that he had been keeping himself in decent condition at least. He would be around 220 kilograms, smaller than Macaulay but slightly heavier than Roku. But the mass and muscle he gained could not make him look well. His limp and scarred body gave him a ragged appearance that made him look like a homeless lion than a king. And this beggar-looking lion came before the wildebeest and began eating as much as he wanted without giving a second thought for anyone else. His pride, which had been starved due to the increasing lack of prey, could not have mattered less to him. His children who were now entering their subadult phase were the first to join him. They shared many similarities to the king himself and they dined together. After that, the mothers who bore Scar these cubs joined in. Therefore, Sarabi, Serafina, Nala and Zuri were the last to eat the wildebeest even though they were the ones to hunt it down. Scar had no regard for the traditions of pride anymore. He ruled as he liked, commanded as he pleased. He was the worst king the Pride Lands ever saw. Perhaps that was why the drought had started. The land did not want such a lion to be her king. It had been over 2 years since Scar took his place as the king. And the Pride Lands cried for a new king. Scar was old and suffered from the scars of his battle with Leo. He was greatly weakened even though he had put on mass. At his current state, he could barely take on 3 lionesses by himself and this lack of physical strength was felt by the whole pride. Scar had difficulty asserting his dominance among his own subjects. And so he turned to the hyenas to mend the insecurity and cement his authority and power. From an outsider's perspective, Scar looked more like the king of hyenas than the king of lions. The clan of hyenas thrived because of this. Not only were they multiplying at an alarming rate but other clans from outside the Pride Lands were flooding in to come under Scar. It could be said that the abrupt increase in predators, especially hyenas who were known for their greed, was the main reason behind the drought that was happening in the Pride Lands. Currently, the number of hyenas present in the Pride Lands was unknown but it was big enough to slowly bleed the paradise dry and turn it into hell. At the rate things were going, the Pride Lands would be uninhabitable in the next 5 years. A testament to how a bad king could ruin a kingdom in the span of 1 generation. Got it. Nala shouted as she burst from the bush, kicking up a cloud of dust. Her paws slammed down on the rabbit just as it turned to flee, and her jaws clamped around its neck before it could scream. Zuri trotted over with a smug flick of her tail, 2 limp rabbits hanging from her mouth. "That's 4, she mumbled through the fur. They both walked over to a dry log and dropped their kills before panting slightly. The rabbits lay in a small pile, twitching now and then from the leftover spasms of death. Zuri had a smile on her face. She seemed to enjoy hunting the rabbits more than she went hunting any bigger prey. Her smile almost seemed permanent. It was because the act of hunting the rabbits reminded her greatly of her cubhood and Leo, who was the one who taught his fellow cubs how to hunt the rabbits when even adults failed to do so. It was an ambush strategy. Since rabbits were so timid and quick to flee, the goal was not to stalk them and instead to set up the perfect ambush spot by studying their behaviors and habits. The rabbits could not notice them when they stayed still after all. They waited until the prey came to them instead of stalking or chasing, opposite to the nature of the lion's hunting style. Now that Zuri was old enough to think, she admired Leo for how advanced and innovative he was since he was a cub. And now, that knowledge had saved them from starving. Zuri and Nala were perhaps the most unfavored by the king among the pride. Zuri was hated by Scar ever since she sided with Leo when he was kicked out and Nala was always a rebel. It was precisely because of this that they could not even get their fill from the wildebeest they hunted. After feeding time was over, they came to the plains to hunt the rabbits in order to fill their belly. The prey lived in small social groups, so they were able to kill quite a bit of them. It would be more than enough to sustain them for another week. "This one's fat," Nala muttered as she began eating the kills while they were fresh. "Too bad it didn't run when it noticed something amiss. Habit kills more prey than claws," Zuri said as she began eating a rabbit of her own. "That's what he said," Nala shrugged. The 2 friends ate the rabbits while the sun slowly disappeared on the horizon. By the time they finished every rabbit, it was early in the night, so they decided to head back home. The night had fully settled in by the time Nala and Zuri reached the Pride Rocks. They moved smoothly across the cracked terrain, their bodies tired from today's hunt, but their stomachs comfortably full. As they neared the rocky base of the great monolith, they slowed down. A dark haze cloaked the area around the base of Pride Rock. They looked like solid shadows from an outsider's perspective. It was thicker than mere shadows or the darkness of the night. And the two lionesses knew exactly what it was. Hyenas. Dozens, perhaps even hundreds of them. Their matted bodies crowded the slopes, the boulders, even the ledges. Yellow eyes glinted in the dark like scattered embers, and their face had crooked grins. They began making ugly sounds and guttural laughs when Zuri and Nala passed them. Zuri barely held back a snarl, her ears flattened against her skull. "Disgusting," she muttered. Nala's lip curled slightly, but she kept moving. "Don't look at them. That's what they want." But Zuri did look. Her gaze swept across the swarm, taking in how dense their numbers were now compared to the previous years. The Pride Rock, once a symbol of lion pride and majesty, had become a throne of vermin. She hated them. To the point she was wishing their extinction. These vile dogs were just as responsible as Scar in ruining the kingdom, her home. One large hyena with a torn ear barked a laugh and snapped her jaws at them as they passed. Others chuckled, whispering among themselves in low, coarse voices. Nala didn't flinch, but Zuri turned her head slightly and gave a low growl. She found it difficult to control herself when it came to them. She considered them the real enemy, even more so than Scar was. The hyenas only laughed harder. They walked up the sloped path toward the den carved into the rock, passing two lionesses lying flat near the entrance. Neither greeted them. In Scar's kingdom, solidarity was fading, replaced by suspicion, silence, and survival. Inside the den, the air was stale and heavy. The scent of lion fur mixed with old bones and the rot of uncleaned kills. Scar was not there. Good. Come, you two, Sarabi invited the two females. A group of lionesses huddled together in one part of the corner. Most of them were already asleep. Nala quickly went forward and joined the group in their sleep. Meanwhile, Zuri stayed and watched them for a few seconds before she walked away. She moved to another corner of the den which had a smooth surface due to constant occupation. Leo was like an outcast when he was a member of the Pride. This was due to his lack of tail and also due to Scar's influence. He would now cuddle with the rest of the Pride and would sleep in that exact corner. Not too far, yet not too close to the other members. Zuri used to lie with him, and even after he left, it became a habit. She patted the rocky surface a few times before she curled up in that corner to sleep. The Serengeti. The lionesses were forced to finish the remaining meat of the buffalo. They ate until it felt like they had eaten too much. But the constant pressure put on their shoulder by Leo's simple presence was enough to make them finish everything. It was the fullest that the lions ever felt. They did not have the willingness to move and dropped in the place where they stood. They took a nap so that their body could quickly digest the meal. While the females were out of commission, Leo was hanging around with the cubs and supervising them as they ate. He quietly observed them to see who was the strongest cub and whatnot. The lionesses realized they were completely wrong in their judgment of the new king. They were even comfortable letting him supervise the cubs almost immediately because they knew if he really wanted to kill them, he could do so anytime. He did not need to strike while they were asleep. It was hard to be stubborn against Leo. The Pride was quickly submitting to his presence as an authority. What Scar took weeks to do, Leo would be able to do it in a few days. But the rest did not last long. 4 hours later, Leo woke up the whole Pride with his deep roar. The sound, which felt deafening miles away, felt world-ending when it was near. The whole Pride woke up immediately. "Get up, it's time to move," Leo commanded before he began walking away. Move where? That was in everyone's mind. It was rare for lions to move a few days after eating. Now they were forced to move only a few hours after eating their biggest meal. It was difficult to follow such a command, but everyone stood up and followed behind the king without question. Normally, lions would spend most of their time sleeping, cuddling, and lazing around the plains with a full belly. They only ever moved when it was time to hunt again. This helped them conserve much energy and they could live for weeks without eating. But Leo was going to change that. He was going to break such traditions and force the rest of the lions into his lifestyle. They would realize soon that they needed to eat that much food for the upcoming days. The new king was not going to allow them such a lazy lifestyle anymore. The main reason why Leo was able to eat so much food was because he burned just as much after all. The pride walked through the open savanna for hours. They did not know where they were going, merely following the king, who seemed to know exactly where he was going. Eventually, in the afternoon, the pride reached their destination. It was a beautiful copy in the middle of the savanna. The lionesses did not need to be told where they were because they could tell from the scent. The whole area was filled with a powerful, attractive scent of their king. It was enough to make their head dizzy. A lone powerful scent was much different from the three distinct scents of kings after all. It's his home. The females whispered among themselves as they watched the king climb up the hill with practiced ease. The cubs were quick to follow behind him. They ran up the hills excitedly, happy to discover the new unfamiliar terrain. The rest of the pride also climbed up the hill. The whole place was big enough to house the entire pride, and each member was able to find their own spot upon the rocky hill. Due to the rocky terrain, the lions could not hang out as one giant group, so they splintered into smaller parts. The places that had thick remnants of Leo's scent were sought after. Small fights broke out to claim those places as well. Occupying those places could mean favor from the king or his regular presence after all. By the time the pride settled, it was late in the afternoon. Leo was lying down on the highest part of the hill. He was overlooking the entire savanna as the evening breeze hit his mane. He nodded to himself, pleased to see the pride settle nicely even though there were some conflicts in between. At this point, two females climbed up the hill and headed towards them. They were the only lionesses that had the courage to approach the king directly. Because they knew what they could offer, they were without cubs and were ready to breed. The other lionesses did not approach because they had cubs or were not in heat. The two were young lions, obviously from their smell that they had not been bred, and if Leo decided to mate with them, his cubs would be their first. The king only raised an eyebrow. He did not make any move even when the lionesses flaunted themselves before him, flicking their tail in a coquettish manner. He looked stoic, even more so without a tail. The two lionesses note that the king was hard to please, but that made them want him even more. They lay down and curled themselves near him. Far enough to be out of touch but close enough to be felt. If only they knew the king was frozen at the moment, his own inexperience made him unaware of what to do next. In the end, he spoke. "What are your names?" Because, of course, the human mind wouldn't want intercourse without even knowing the partner's name. "My name is Lela," one of them said with a bow. "And I am Zuri, my lord." The effect of Leo was immediate. His still body tensed up, and he became a statue. His whole focus was gone, and he stared at the setting sun instead of looking at them. It was the first time the two lions ever got a read on the king. He looked at the setting sun like how they wanted him to look at them. With eyes of longing. Leo snapped out fast, his unfocused eyes returned to them. He locked gaze with a lioness called Zuri, and then he said, "No," his tone was firm, "you will not be Zuri. Pick another name," and that was enough to ruin the whole mood that the two were trying to set up. Zuri was stunned, speechless for a moment before she nodded in obedience. "What shall I be called then?" she asked. "I don't know, just not Zuri," Leo answered. The name alone brought much emotion out of Leo. The kind that wanted him to do something stupid. Like going back home immediately. He sighed and then went to sleep, leaving the two lionesses to try their luck another time. At the moment, the king was still tired. First POV. I woke up before dawn once more. But this time my aim was not to hunt but to patrol my new kingdom. The Serengeti. All mine. I wouldn't lie, it was quite exciting to patrol around. I realized I've done this countless times before, but it felt different when I did it with the knowledge that I was the king. The experience felt different. The land hadn't changed, but I had. The morning air was cool, with the scent of damp earth and old trees clinging to my nose. My breath left faint clouds as I walked, the sky slowly brightening behind me. I roared. The sound tore deep from my gut and then thundered out of my chest. The sound echoed, bouncing from mountain to mountain. It was a declaration of presence and authority. I always wanted to do that. For a year, I had heard other kings roar, and now I was doing the same. The patrol lasted till early morning. I could not cover as much distance as I wanted to, but that was understandable. I only had so much urine in the morning. The brothers were 3 and even they could only patrol a portion of their territory. If I wanted to control the whole kingdom and make my presence, I would need to do something new. I thought of this idea last night. It would be good if the pride was constantly moving around the Serengeti instead of staying in one particular region. Like a nomadic pride. The whole Serengeti was the size of 4 lion pride territories combined. We could set up different bases in specific areas and rotate as time passed. This would ensure the pride was constantly on the move and full of activity so they could be strong. It would also ensure we had plenty of prey and our resources were not limited to one area when we had such a wide territory. In this way, I would be able to make my presence known throughout the land. But all those plans were for another day. For now, I need to take things slow and establish a stable relationship. I was going to change a lot of things, doing things differently from tradition, and I need a strong base for that. By the time I returned to the copy, most of the lionesses were awake and wandering around the hills. Since we reached pretty late last night, they had no time to explore, so they were doing it now. The hill was like a small ecosystem of its own with a small stream, ponds, trees, and animals living in the place. It was a place I recognized as home over the year. I climbed up the hill and noticed 6 or so lionesses gathering in one area of the rocky scar. I was curious to see what they were doing there, so I walked up to them. They flinched back when they noticed my presence and they parted for me. Oddly enough, there were flashes of fear, respect, and something else on their faces when they looked at me. "You've returned," one of them said with a curt bow, followed by the rest of the females. "How was the patrol?" If I remembered correctly, her name was Nia. I recognized her because she was the one I knocked out with one blow when the fight happened. Apparently, she used to be favored by Roku due to her skills and smarts. "It went well, all things considered," I said. "What has garnered all this attention?" I walked up the hill a bit more and then promptly paused when I saw the thing they were looking at. "Oh, I forgot about that." I forced an awkward smile while looking away from the bones and the skulls of lions that I had killed over the past few months. The skulls, in particular, were in good condition, just like I intended. It was quite a scary scene, a pile of lion bones. Most of them had come to my copy and challenged me, or they were living in my copy while I was away, and I killed them upon my return. "It's a cruel world," I said. What else was there to say? The lionesses nodded together, as if what I said made perfect sense to them. They were not like me, a human who reincarnated as a lion. They were born in this world where the strong decided for the weak. They didn't know any better. Were they challengers? One of the lionesses, a new face and scent which I note down immediately to remember. "No," I answered, "just foolish rouges too arrogant for their own good." Before, the pile of bones worked well to ward off any lion who tried to make the copy his home while I was away. But now, I should probably let Grim and his goons clean that out. I rarely occupy the whole copy, but with the pride staying with me, we needed to clean everything up. Or not. Maybe they could make for a good decoration and remind them who their new king was. Is that too evil, though? Lion kings constantly fight challengers, but in the fight for dominance, death was quite rare. Even if the lions died, they rarely die on the spot and would instead pass away in the next few days due to their injuries. So maybe decorating my home with lion skulls was crossing the line. So many unnecessary things to consider. I spent the rest of the day with the pride. The tension had faded almost completely, and each of the lionesses welcomed me warmly whenever I went to them. Although I was still addressed with much respect and fear. The closeness of a real pride like Mufasa had with his subjects was still lacking, but I knew that would happen naturally over time. When the afternoon rolled over, I was lying alongside some of the lionesses, and that was when the same female who approached me yesterday came back once more. Not the one I so rudely commanded to change her name, but the one that was with her. Her name was Lela, if memory serves me right. I could tell immediately that she did not come to simply lie down or stay in my presence. She had other intentions, something way more intimate than simple physical contact. She strode towards me with purpose in her steps, and when she reached me, she immediately initiated contact. She rubbed her flank against mine, slow and deliberate in a way that I felt every length of her body. Then she circled, rubbing me with the other side of her flank. As she walked past me, her tail brushed my face, curling mischievously around my neck, but then she pulled back when I leaned in. I exhaled, steadying myself and reining back control, which was slowly slipping from my grasp. Her scent was thicker and more powerful than the last time. It might seem sudden that she went into heat right after my takeover, But that was biological. The stress and the scent of a new king had pushed her into heat out of instinct. She circled around me, and then came from the opposite side. She bowed her head and then rubbed her muzzle across the length of my body. She buried her face in my thick mane and I could feel her taking in my scent just like I was. I inhaled. The scent that came from her was hard to describe. It felt like warmth and had a hint of life. It was not the delicious smell of meat or blood, but something more primal than even that. The best I could compare it with was the smell of petrol from my past life. It was something like that but 10 times more addictive. The scent alone made me happy, and visible changes happened to me. Third POV. The first episode of Leo's documentary was a great success. It lived up to the hype of the lion, whom almost everyone in the world was familiar with. Leo, the lion, was not a new name for most of the population of the world. He was a known beast whose achievements had been discussed on the internet on whether it was a myth or real. His images had once shocked the internet, and his story was like an exaggerated tale your grandfather used to tell you when you were a child. The researchers neither confirmed nor denied any of the unbelievable things that people said about Leo. In such a scenario, the documentary presented itself as a way for people to finally witness the truth and also know in detail the story and the life of this huge modern lion whom they were familiar with but never knew. The first episode alone had broken records upon its release due to the initial hype and expectation. It lived up to everything the viewers could hope for, and people initially believed that it would be hard to cross that. Wrong. Because upon the release of the second episode, the viewership and the attention that the documentary gained skyrocketed to unbelievable heights. The people who had no interest in this tailless lion found themselves being forced to consume its content. The reason behind such an explosion of fame? It was thekingsarchive.com, a website that holds countless videos, images, articles, research papers, etc., that the researchers who followed Leo had accumulated over half a year. The content only stretched until the timeline that the documentary had covered, and more would be posted upon the release of the third episode. But the contents available on the website so far alone were massive. It just went to show just how eventful Leo's life truly was under the guise of brief mentions and summaries. It was already such an interesting tale from a long shot, but upon a closer look, everything was mind-blowing. And this time, it was not the writers or the podcasters who reaped the benefit. The video editors on the internet were having a field day. Or it would be more correct to say they had a field week. The website was a treasure trove for these types of content creators. They knew that almost all the viewers would not be able to sit through the mundane videos and daily life documentation of a lion. So they created small clips or edits that covered the interesting bits of this content, making it more suitable for the average person. Editors who sit through hours upon hours of influencers live streaming in hopes of being the first to clip an interesting part of the stream found themselves with a great opportunity for content on Leo's life. The first person did it, and it went viral. The second and third person clipped another, and that also went viral. Soon enough, hundreds, no thousands, of people who created this kind of content found themselves working on Leo content. Since Leo was trending at the moment, every interesting clip was sure to go viral. And this only feeds into the trend, further repeating this endless cycle until the whole internet is dominated by them. Like the time when Squid Game first became popular. It was simply everywhere. If someone is on the internet, they have to know Leo. They had to have seen one of his clips or at least know some portion of his story. Willingly or not, you just had to know. It was part of the current world now. Examples of these clips, which are not shown on the documentary or those that are not covered in the story are: Leo bullied a fellow predator in the savannah. A leopard had just had a successful kill and it was sitting on top of a tree with a dead antelope. Leo could be seen standing below the tree and watching the leopard. The lion was only watching, seemingly unable to do anything, when the leopard was so high in the tree. The leopard seemed to think this as well. It began eating its meal on the tree even though Leo was watching. A few minutes later, Leo exploded out. He shot up the tree in an unbelievable show of athleticism considering his size. He was like a bobcat and not a lion. He jumped high and then slapped the leopard right off the branch along with the antelope. After that, Leo chased the leopard away, leaving the dead antelope for himself. But after that happened, Leo did not eat the prey. He only took small snippets here and there before he left the rest for the vultures to finish. He was being a bully for absolutely no reason. It almost looked like he had a personal bone to pick with leopards in general, considering there were multiple examples of him terrorizing them, sometimes even fighting and killing them. Another clip showed Leo lying in the shade of a tree near the watering hole. His eyes were wide open and scanning his surroundings. Then the water exploded, and a crocodile snapped at an impala. It was a normal day in the watering hole of the savannah. An unfortunate prey had become a victim when it was only trying to quench its thirst. Even water had a cost and risk in the wild. But as the video went on, it was clear that the event was a bit different from the rest. The impala had a small calf beside her that refused to run even when every other animal had long fled the scene. The mother impala struggled fiercely but to no avail. The small calf went into the water and tried to hit the crocodile. The small animal wailed and made a helpless sound as if begging for the crocodile to let go of its mother. Maybe it did beg. Because right then, Leo made a move. He burst forth in a blur and he ran along the edges of the watering hole before he reached the crocodile and the impala in only a few seconds. And then, a great splash of water and smoke rose as Leo kicked up dust in his wake. A few seconds later, the mother impala ran out from the chaos, followed by her young calf. The water continued splashing as the crocodile attacked Leo for interrupting its hunt. Big mistake. The crocodile nearly became the one that drowned in the water before it swam away after a few futile struggles and a close call. Leo nearly had its skull more than a few times. After that, Leo walked out of the water. His wet mane looked like a royal cloak around him. The logical conclusion was that Leo tried to steal the prey of the crocodile and that gave a chance for the impala to escape in the end. But for those with hopeful minds and hearts, it looked like Leo just saved the mother impala. Another clip showcased Leo fighting against a small clan of hyenas. From the contents on the kingsarchive.com alone, it became evident that Leo had a huge beef with hyenas in general. The lion found the most ridiculous way to bully the poor scavengers and would never let go of the chance to beat some of them. The clips of these were plentiful, prompting editors to count how many hyenas Leo killed in half a year. The result was 74 hyenas in 6 months. It was not too surprising that a lion had beef with a hyena, as that was almost instinctual. But Leo's hate seemed very personal. This unique character trait of Leo blew up, and soon, many memes followed. Memes that compared Leo to a rejected painter from Austria. Or memes that edited Leo as Tobirama and the hyenas as Uchiha. It was not only the clips of videos but also the growing community and fans that helped in the popularity of Leo. The next clip showed a fun video compared to the others, where it was just Leo being a menace to the ecosystem. It was a breath of fresh air for the people. The clip was a well-edited video of Leo trying to eat a porcupine in the savannah. There was literally no reason for the lion to want to eat the spiky little rodent other than just because. Leo was holding a big stick with his mouth and poking the porcupine. Sometimes, he tried beating the rodent with a stick but to no avail. Some people commented that Leo looked like a human trying to move a worm. When the porcupine was agitated, it would charge straight at Leo with its spines facing him, and Leo would back away comically. It was hilarious to see the super beast lion taking his first L from a porcupine. In the end, though, Leo managed to kill and eat the porcupine, but at the cost of getting stabbed in many places. A funny meme also emerged from this. It was a close-up shot of Leo chewing on the meat of the porcupine with a straight face. Then a vulture asked, "Was it worth it?" The image zoomed out to reveal Leo with many porcupine needles around his entire body. He said with a straight face, "Yes." The image also had alternate versions where Leo said, "Still better than going vegan," or where he said, "It's about sending a message." Leo was quickly becoming an internet icon. There was the funny side, the meme side, the serious side, the dark side, and the scientific side if you were a fan of Leo. Everyone had a place they belonged to. After a week had passed, the release of the 3rd episode was approaching fast, and people were more excited than ever. On the day of the release, multiple websites crashed merely from the people waiting for the episode to air. For a long time, the only thing that viewers could see was the title of the episode, but that was enough to get their blood boiling. One of the many things that kept the fandom alive and interacting, other than the clips from kingsarchive.com, was the many discussions about Leo and his overall strength and power. I mean, what fandom did not like power scaling? Or arguing about who was stronger and what not? The people who knew about Leo were the same. But unlike other fandoms, it was not just nerds but people, scientists, researchers, biologists, your grandpa, and even your grandma. They could all take part in the power scaling. You don't need more information other than what you already knew to say that a lion would never beat a grizzly bear. It included everyone. And when everyone was included, The opinions and arguments were literally endless. Leo versus a grizzly bear. Who wins? Most people seem to side with Leo. Leo versus polar bears. Who wins? Most argue that the polar bear is the most powerful predator on land and it was simply too much for Leo, no matter how special he was. Leo versus buffalo? Although not covered by the documentary, most people already knew Leo hunts buffalo. But some still argued that if put in an arena and forced to fight head-on, the buffalo would win. Leo versus Shere Khan? This question delved into a bit of a fictional scenario. Most agree that Shere Khan soloed Leo. But perhaps that would change as more episodes came out from the documentary. Leo versus 100 gorillas. This question split the people. Leopards were known to be able to kill gorillas, so half of the people think that Leo could easily kill 100 gorillas by picking them off one by one. In the end, it depends on the situation. Leo versus a Siberian tiger. This would need a whole chapter to cover. The amount of shitstorm was already at biblical proportions. But among all these debates and arguments, the most trending question was Leo versus the Serengeti Kings. The world did not know of the three royal brothers until the release of the second episode. But after that, people really looked into who they were and found a documentary on YouTube that covered their story. The humans had been documenting them way before Leo came into the picture, so although their legacy was ended by Leo, the contents that happened before that were enough to make a 2-hour-long documentary. It was titled Fangs of the Same Flesh, and the documentary covered the story of three brothers, Snow, Miles, and Dexter, who went on a campaign of conquest in their youth. In their rage and greed, they killed 6 lion kings and took over the whole Serengeti region, which was big enough to house multiple prides. Their kill count of lions had already surpassed the 100 mark by the time they met Leo. They were a formidable force of nature that ruled for 5 years. This documentary, which barely had 50,000 views on YouTube before, suddenly exploded and attained 50 million viewers in a week. People who could not wait for the next episode wanted to see and learn about Leo's enemies. And in the process, many of them became fans of these three brothers. Unlike Leo's story, which only covered his early days for now, the documentary covered the brothers from their subadult days until they met Leo, so their story was more complete, and many people found it easier to root for them. From the second episode of the documentary, it was hinted that Leo was able to defeat the three brothers and claim their land, but many refused to believe that it was a fair fight. There were many speculations and fake news that told things about how Leo defeated the brothers, so until it was officially confirmed, people did not know what to believe. Most people assumed that Leo had picked the kings off one by one in their patrol or taken advantage of their sickness or illness. There were also people who thought Leo made a coalition of his own to overthrow the kings before he betrayed his own people and ruled the Serengeti alone. All of which would be possible due to Leo's intelligence, which has been his greatest point in the documentary so far. These questions were trending all over the internet. Documentary Episode 3, The New King. Name, Dr. T. Somatansan. Role, Lead Researcher and Ethologist. Nationality, Indian, from Nagaland, Northeast India. Age, 62. We are back, everyone. Dr. Tonson said while opening his arms. The suspicious excitement in his tone clearly tells the viewers that the poor doctor was forced to do this by the producers or directors of the documentary. Welcome back to another episode of the anticipated documentary about the Lion King Leo. In the last episode, we ended the story in a cliffhanger where Leo was just about to hunt bigger prey as a solution to the challenges presented by the dry season, he said. The screen changed to show a brief recap of the second episode of the documentary, which covered Leo's fight with Roku, a 6-month time skip, and then his confrontation with Mbali brothers or the Serengeti Kings. The episode ended with Leo walking away from his copy in the morning with deadly focus on his steps. People who had watched the contents on kingsarchive.com knew exactly what that scene meant. It was a sign that Leo was going out to hunt. After that, the scene briefly cuts to a herd of buffalo and then zooms into a giant, powerful bachelor that blew out steam and smoke while staring at the camera. The episode had ended there. Now, we have teased a lot in the last episode by mentioning how this led to the greatest growth period in Leo's life and how he completely thrived when other predators starved. I know everyone is excited to see that and you waited a week for this episode. But bear with me here, the doctor said and held his hand forward as if to calm down the viewers. Before we could dive into the topic of Leo hunting bigger prey, we first needed to cover another subject that had been withheld for far too long. It is also directly linked to the former topic, so we must cover it first. Dr. Tonson rubbed his hands together and the small smile on his face widened to astonishing proportions. A red lipstick and he would look like the Joker. As an ethologist, someone who studies animal behavior, this particular topic might as well be the most exciting for me, and it could be described in one word, he said. A small pause, and then the great reveal. Vultures. The scene changed abruptly, causing surprise to the viewers. Loud background music with an African theme started blasting in full. The scene was that of an aerial view of the whole Serengeti taken by a drone. The drone showed the majestic landscape of the savanna. The videography of such scenes was always impactful, especially for those who mostly lived in cities and were not familiar with the wonders of nature. No matter how hard man tried, it could never imitate a fraction of the beauty that was nature. A few seconds into the stunning view and you could see a bird. No, not just any bird. It was the lappet-faced vulture, the biggest and most prominent subspecies of vulture in the African savanna. With a wingspan of 10 feet, it was one of the most majestic creatures of the sky. The drone took a great shot of this vulture in particular and continued following for a while. After some time, more vultures started appearing in view. What began as a single vulture soon turned into 2, and then 5, then 10, then a dozen, and before long, the number of vultures in the sky neared hundreds. Their collective flapping wings created enough gusts to make the drone footage wobbly and make the scene come almost alive to the viewer. It's like they could feel the presence of the vultures. It was breathtaking footage, especially if you knew that vultures never took part in coordinated flights like cranes or other birds. Vultures were scavengers, so they were rough and selfish. To see them flying together like this alone was a phenomenon that only happened when a large animal like an elephant died. You see, there has been a misconception. Dr. Tonson's voice sounded over the incredible footage of vultures flying together. Leo was never alone, he said. He had an army in the sky. And then the footage cuts to a scene of Leo sharing a meal with one vulture in particular. At first, it would appear as if the lion was just tolerating the vulture. The people who had watched detailed content posted on the website also saw this but never noticed something weird. But the documentary revealed something. The footage changed to Leo eating different prey in different locations. But in almost every case, there was one single vulture beside him, and the documentary pointed out that it was the same vulture every single time. Now that couldn't possibly be a coincidence. It took us a few months to notice the relationship Leo had with the vultures. But it took us nearly a year to discover just how intimate that relationship was, Dr. Tonson said. This wasn't just two different animals of a completely different species cooperating for the benefit of each other, he said. And the footage stopped and slowed down in one surprising scene. Of vultures bowing down before Leo. The scene was enough to grip the heart of the viewers. It was an incredibly shocking scene. An animal bowing to a completely different species? How in the world did that happen? What you are looking at are animals of a completely different species, serving another as their king. It was the first discovery of its kind. One that blew the minds of every researcher that witnessed it. Name: Dr. Elias Thorne. Field: Behavioral Ecology, specializes in interspecies cooperation and scavenger dynamics. Nationality: British, from Cumbria, England. Age: 44. The screen went dark, and then it brightened up again to reveal an office of one of the researchers. It was the kind of office that you would expect from someone who dedicated his life to learning. The office was messy, but there was an odd order in the mess, as if everything was in its place but just not in the right position. You could find graphs, notes, random anatomical pictures, paintings, and laptops lying around the furniture. On the office table sat the most English-looking man you would ever find. The man had pale skin that showed he had rarely seen the sun and lived most of his life under overcast weather. He had a turtleneck sweater, and his face was creating slight wrinkles. His blonde hair was messy and unkempt while also showing a receding hairline. His blue eyes had a gray hue to them, and right now, they were looking at the camera with equal nervousness and excitement. Some of you might not be too familiar with me, as I am not part of the original crew that studied Leo at the start. I was only appointed to that position after the end of my previous projects regarding the three coalition of brothers. He spoke with a British accent. Nevertheless, I was the first one to notice and point out the unique relationship Leo seemed to have with the vultures, he continued, which, in the beginning, we thought was a small cooperation. Like elephants and birds, where the birds eat the parasite and bugs on the elephants, or wildebeests and zebras, where the zebras eat the tougher shoots of grass, exposing softer shoots for wildebeests who, in return, could detect predators better and provide safety for the zebras. But as time will teach us, the relationship Leo had with the vultures was on a much deeper level. It was a king and servant relationship, he said. The scene changed once more to show footage of Leo interacting with the vultures. Again, the documentary highlighted one vulture in particular who was always closest to Leo. The viewers could also differentiate it somewhat now as the vulture seemed bigger and healthier than the rest. Upon discovering this relationship they had, we went back to every video and picture that we have taken of Leo. We tried finding exactly when it happened. Did Leo enter the Serengeti with the vultures? Or did he form this relationship when he came to this land? If so, when did it happen? He said over the scene. The screen rewound the documentary and the videos until it stopped to the first image that was taken of Leo in his first sighting. The image was taken only minutes after he first encountered the human in their camp. We believe that this exact moment was the very first time they met, he said. The king met his most loyal subject. The image was of Leo sitting under a shade with a zebra carcass in front of him. The tree they were staying under was beside a watering hole and Leo had just stolen the kill from a crocodile. And sitting right beside him and eating a separate chunk of meat was the same vulture that was shown in the previous videos. The vulture looked thinner and smaller, but it was still the same one. And among all the vultures, the one you see was the first to serve the king. We named him Grim. Now this is what I live for, Dr. Thorne said while laughing to himself. There was genuine wonder in his tone. Upon taking a closer look at the older footage and observing Leo and the vultures with a new perspective, we believe that we have a concrete idea of how this interspecies relationship came to be, he said. It had everything to do with the fact that Leo was a successful lone lion. He began. The scene changed, showing different videos and reference points to back up his claim and what he was saying to the audience. Vultures are scavengers. They have a habit of following other predators for food. So it was not uncommon for them, or in this case, Grim, to follow a lion. But you see, most lions hunt in prides. When they succeed, they tear through the carcass with the ferocity of a team. Only bones are all that's left within minutes, he said. The scene showed a pride of lions taking down prey before tearing it apart and devouring it in seconds. It was brutal and efficient. It was nature. It was. Bruh. I'm sleepy as hell, I dunno. But Leo, like I said, was a lone male. He was powerful and just as successful in his hunts compared to the average pride, and yet he was still alone. That means no matter how big he was, he can't possibly finish his kills all by himself. One stomach is simply not enough, and it's not like they have a refrigerator in the savannah. Meat rots quickly in the heat and the remains would certainly go to waste. The scene changed again and showed Leo eating the organs and some part of the meat before leaving the rest on the ground. And that's where Grim comes in. Grim, our pioneering vulture, is clever. Vultures, especially lappet-faced ones like him, are surprisingly intelligent for scavengers. He must have realized very early on that following Leo meant consistent meals. Not just the occasional scraps you get from following a pride, but full-on feasts. And Grim was most certainly correct in his assumption, he said with a smile. Too correct in fact, Thorne said, lowering his voice slightly. As we know from the earlier episodes, Leo hunts a lot. He hunts around 5 times more than any other rogue lion. This was one of the main reasons why he managed to grow as big as he did. And that constant rhythm of kills created a surplus of insane proportions, unlike anything the savannah had ever seen before. Very soon, it was not just Grim but a whole flock of them that were gathering around Leo. But here is where things get really interesting, he said. It took us some time to see that the vultures were not the only ones benefiting from this relationship. And even more time to finally conclude that the vultures did not get the remains due to their intelligence, but Leo was rewarding them for their service to him. And how did the vultures serve him, you ask? Dr. Thorne said, well. A video was shown on screen. Of a tailless lion that walked across the savannah with purpose in his steps. He was not stopping to take in his environment or putting up his nose to observe the scents like a lion who is tracking prey would usually do. No. He walked like he knew exactly where he was going. The reason? The camera panned out to show the vultures flying right above him. The video continued playing, and as it played, it showed clearly that the lion was following behind the vulture. The vulture never flew too high or flew too fast. It was unnaturally slow and it would sometimes do circles in the air while waiting for the lion to catch up. It was clearly guiding Leo. They served Leo by guiding him towards prey, the doctor revealed. A lone lion did not have the advantage of numbers. They could not have trackers, hunters, fighters, etc. They had to do everything by themselves, and because of that, when it comes to tracking down available prey, they are at a considerable disadvantage. This is often the main reason why rogue males starve and cannot find prey. But Leo used the vultures to make up for that advantage. Tracking prey, which should be his main disadvantage as a lone male, suddenly became his best attribute with the help of the vultures. This is because obviously vultures could track prey better than even hundreds of lionesses. And the vultures were not only leading him to possible prey, he said. The documentary showed sad footage of a juvenile buffalo mooing and bellowing as loudly as it could. It lay on the ground and no matter how many times it tried, it could not get up due to the injury on its legs. An injury caused by bachelors fighting and crashing into the young buffalo. Not long after, the mooing and cry for mother attracted the wrong kind of attention. A vulture landed beside the baby buffalo, who looked at it curiously, wondering if it would help. But the vulture simply observed. It hopped and circled around the buffalo a few times. It inspected the injury on the leg deeply before it released a crooked cry and then it took off to the sky. The scene changed to aerial footage as a drone followed the same vulture. It flew for a minute before diving down and flying right above one specific lion. Leo. The vulture released a cry, which immediately attracted Leo's attention. He got up and the vulture began guiding him to the injured buffalo. It was an unnerving sight to see two completely different animals coordinating and working together like that. When they reached the buffalo, it was already killed by the hyenas and they were starting to cut open the tough skin to eat the carcass. Leo exploded out in fury upon seeing them. He was able to kill one of the hyenas before chasing away the other two. And then Leo and the vultures eat the carcass. Leo ate first and when he had his fill, Grim took his turn. After that, Leo walked away, and the other vultures had their feast. The predators, even the hyenas, which were around, could only watch the vultures eat, as Leo was always not far behind the vultures, even though he walked away. The vultures also lead him towards injured prey or dying animals. Basically, they were guiding Leo to every possible prey, making sure that the lion they served could seize every opportunity the Serengeti presented, he said. Now take a look at Leo as he stuck around while the other vultures eat, he said. The documentary showed Leo walking around the carcass when he was already done eating. It also showed him chasing away some jackals that came too close while the vultures finished the remains. Leo protects the vultures as they finish his remains. This was what gave away that they were in an intentional partnership. If not, Leo would have just walked away after he was done eating, like other lions usually would. Instead, he stayed and protected them and that indicated that he was rewarding the vultures or paying them back for helping him, he said. The footage regarding what the doctor mentioned continued playing as he gave time for the viewers to absorb the information. What you are witnessing now is one of the rarest, if not the rarest, forms of symbiosis we've seen between interspecies animals, he said. Now, why do I say this? Well, because we observe similar symbiosis between other animals as well. One of the most relevant being the partnership between ravens and wolves, he said. The scene changed abruptly from the hot savanna to the cold lands of the Arctic and North America. It showed the two mentioned animals, wolves and dark ravens. Their partnership is similar to that of Leo and the vultures. The ravens are incredibly smart birds and they lead the pack of wolves to possible prey and sometimes to injured animals. The ravens also protected the pups of the wolves while the adults went hunting. In return, the ravens were allowed to eat a portion of the meal, he said. The documentary showed videos of these. Videos of the raven protecting young pups by making sure none wandered away and then guiding the wolf pack towards prey, similar to how the vultures guide Leo. And finally, the two animals share meals together. But the difference between the wolves and the ravens compared to the vultures and Leo was clear when taking a deeper look. The partnership in the cold region took place over hundreds of years to develop and evolve, while Leo and the vultures developed it in a few days or weeks, he said. Not only that, the structural relationship with Leo and the vultures was far more complex. For example, Leo was the king and the vulture's servant. One vulture, which we named Grim, seemed to be the main leader of the vultures. And among the flock, there seemed to be a further hierarchy that we are not absolutely sure of, he said. Which is absolutely insane, by the way. The evolution of such a complex partnership and hierarchy in such a short amount of time was deemed impossible, going against the theory of evolution itself. It was so insane, in fact, that it invented a whole theory and a branch of study called Leoquor, taken from Leo and Locker, which means I speak in Latin, or otherwise known as the King's Tongue hypothesis a few years back, he said. For those of you who don't know, you can look it up right now and I will show the brief definition I got from Google, Dr. Thorne said, and then the screen changed to text where the definition was written. Leoquor, also known as the King's Tongue hypothesis, is a theoretical framework proposing the existence of a latent, non-verbal language system shared across certain animal species, enabling real-time interspecies communication through unknown cognitive, emotional, or sensory channels. First proposed following the observed behavior of a lion known as Leo, whose interactions with vultures displayed unprecedented complexity and synchronicity, the theory challenges existing models of instinct-driven behavior and suggests that animals may possess a capacity for intentional, cooperative communication beyond species boundaries. The definition was displayed only for a few seconds. The episode length was limited, so the producers did not want to waste too much time explaining it. That would require a whole episode to do. Basically, we believe that animals have a magical language which they can use to speak with each other. Dr. Thorne simplified it to the extreme. Most researchers try to use a complex definition because the theory sounded stupid when said directly, but that's basically what the theory is about. What's even crazier is that many institutions and even governments are funding the research of this theory, and so far. He paused briefly. We have positive feedback and the theory might be true. The viewers felt an odd shiver run down their spine as they got goosebumps. How groundbreaking would it be if that were true? That would flip their understanding of the world as a whole. This is just another example of why Leo is so significant to the world. He is not just a badass lion that beats up other lions and hunts down big prey. No. He is an iconic figure that brings about revolutions and discovery in animal science with his existence alone, Dr. Thorne said, a voice so filled with awe and passion that you would not believe he was talking about an animal. The King's Tongue hypothesis might seem far-fetched to you now, but as this episode progressed, you would realize that there is simply no other possible explanation for what Leo had with the vultures, he said and then laughed. I swear we are not crazy guys. Leading Leo to possible prey, herds and injured animals, is one of the mildest things the vultures did. Imagine them following complex instructions and strategy in order to create a favorable situation for Leo. Imagine them going against all their natural instinct and breaking all tradition. I can't explain everything right now, but those will be explored further as this episode progresses, he said. The screen changed and this time, it showed the three kings of the Serengeti. It showed them patrolling their territory, roaring to ward off challengers and marking the trees with their scent. Another vital role the vultures played was between Leo and the three kings of the Serengeti. Initially, we believed that Leo did not encounter the three kings due to the sheer magnitude of the land. We thought that it was a coincidence that the three kings could not find the young lion, even after all the conflicts they had. But no, he said. The vultures were actively helping Leo avoid the enemies until he was ready to face them. The kings did not have the time to track after one male with their duty as a king, and so that gave him enough time to grow strong until he could overthrow the kings, he said. Now the screen cut back to Dr. Elias Throne as he sat down at his office desk. His eyes looked up, gazing through the ceiling and into the vastness of the universe. He had a smile on his face while his mind went elsewhere. Just thinking about that for a moment. The way the vultures. He could barely find words. The way that Grimm knew Leo's death would bring an end to their feasts, they opted to protect him from the kings of the pride that left no remains in their hunts. He took a deep breath, or was it just Leo commanding them to do so? Am I looking so deeply into this that I miss the simpler truth? Which is more believable? Do two very intelligent animals come together at the same place at the same time, or is one lion that smart? At this age, they are showing more intelligence than the average person, he admitted with a laugh. He fixed his posture upon his seat and you could see he was gathering words as he did so. He fixed his collar ever so slowly before he spoke again. It's one of those ways that this very special lion changes the world that surrounds him like a true king. The partnership had a massive effect on the ecosystem. The scene finally changes again, from the office to the open savanna. The video showed ground footage taken by a cameraman. It shows the blue sky that was slowly being decorated by vultures soaring high and excited. Vultures have been associated with death since the beginning of time. So nearly 100 of them circling in the sky gave off a foreboding feeling. What you are seeing now is the consequence of Leo's presence after a few months. The vultures are guiding him towards prey and they are circling around, waiting patiently for Leo to hunt them down, he said. They circled slowly, methodically, like spirits forming a dark halo in the heavens. Vultures have long been associated with death. Thorn's voice returned, quieter now. It's one of the oldest symbols in history. Where there is death, vultures follow. Then, with quiet certainty, he spoke again. But that saying has gone old. A beat. Now. Death follows them. The videos of vultures flying continued to play on the screen. It went like that for a while as Dr. Elias Thorne's presence slowly faded away with a lack of commentary. The vultures released anguished cries in the sky, not because they were in pain by any means, but they seemed to reflect the disasters that happened on the savannah. The dry season. The camera zoomed out to show not only the sky but also the ground on which the vultures circled above. The earth was dry and cracked, with a few persistent vegetation here and there, but even those were more yellow than the usual green. And upon the ground was a small herd of buffalo grazing. It seemed those were going to be the main target for today. Dr. Thorne's voice lingered in the minds of the viewers as they watched the vultures circling above the buffalo herd. Death follows the vultures. Name, Hannah Park. Role, zoologist and big cat specialist. Nationality, Korean American, from Seattle. Age, 34. Bravery and recklessness are two very different things, even though they may share the same principles, Hannah said as she sat in front of the camera in the studio of the production. She was one of the few researchers who oversaw the production of the documentary. The other researchers, like Dr. Thompson, were interviewed in their office and so on and were not directly involved in the intricate directing of the content. The very first instance that we realized Leo was hunting buffalo, we thought that it was a reckless move on his part, she said. We know that the dry season had many problems and challenges that all predators have to face. But Leo was not among them. In fact, he still maintained his habit of hunting down prey once every 3 days at least. He ate meals that would look like death sentences to any other lions due to the sheer quantity. Therefore, he was in no way desperate or in need to do what he did. It would seem that when every other animal was trying to survive the dry season, Leo was determined to thrive, she said. The scene then changed to show a video of Leo walking with deathly focus through the savannah. He was being guided by one vulture, the one people had been familiarized with, Grim. Meanwhile, the other vultures were already soaring above the herd that Leo was heading towards. We deployed 2 drones to capture every moment of the hunt. Although most of us thought that hunting buffalo was a reckless move, none questioned if he could do it or not. Because honestly, if a single lion was ever going to take down a buffalo solo, it might as well be, and always must be, Leo, she said, a small amount of pride in her tone. The video continued playing for a few seconds more before it cut to Leo standing before the herd of buffalo. He gazed at them for a long time before he began circling around them. The footage was taken from above, so it revealed everything without skipping over even the tiniest detail. The people got to witness how Leo was slowly circling around the buffalo while tightening that circle each time he completed one rotation. He was not stalking them. He was already hunting them at this point. Looking for an opportunity to lash out and select a target prey. It was like someone looking over the menu in a restaurant, observing which one he wanted to eat. In the meantime, Hannah gave some information about the buffalo. The African Cape buffalo, Syncerus caffeyer, is one of the most dangerous animals in all of Africa. Not because of venom, speed, or stealth, but because of raw, unfiltered rage. The bachelors began moving to the outer parts of the herd. They released loud huffs and scraped the ground with their hooves, ready to attack Leo at any moment. They are one of the few creatures on land that do not run from lions. They don't fear the kings of the jungle. Nicknamed the Black Death, they kill over 200 people every year and are known as the most dangerous animal in the African savanna due to their aggressive nature, she said. To bring one down, even a healthy pride must gamble with injury and death, she said, and then paused briefly before continuing. The reason might as well be beyond our understanding or comprehension, but for whatever reason he might have, Leo decided to take on this beast alone. It was the ultimate test for an apex predator. Boom! A thunderous explosion sounded out, spooking the viewers to the extreme. The sound was that of a bachelor bursting forth towards the lion that was hunting them. The beast was fury and rage made flesh. Bestowed with incredible strength by nature, The buffalo knew a single lion was a victim in their clash. On the other side, Leo smiled. And so it began. It was so abrupt that none of us were prepared for it. The scene was frightening on video, but witnessing it in real life was outright terrifying. It was one of those moments where every fiber of your human instinct went, "No way this is happening," she said over the video. "We thought Leo was going to target a weaker member, an older member, and maybe a juvenile. One strategy would be to make a chase and trick the buffalo into chaos while Leo picks off an easy target." No. It was not even close to what any of us were expecting. The video played as the buffalo charged towards Leo, who was standing his ground. His posture and expression showed absolutely zero fear, even when the behemoth was on his way to wreak destruction. The bachelor was estimated to be nearing a ton. The distance between Leo and the buffalo was enough for the behemoth to reach half of its top speed. "We calculated around 35,000 newtons upon impact, which is equivalent to a mini truck hitting you," Anna explained. For reference, if the average man weighing 60 kilograms were to be hit by this, it would be instant death, and all the luck in the world wouldn't save him. "The force would be enough to send you flying across halfway through a soccer field. The G-force alone would rupture your organs," she said, and then laughed at her own ridiculous calculations. "It's truly baffling to think about how strong these animals are," she said, "but what's even more baffling is what Leo decided to do when faced with such raw power." In the video, Leo finally decides to make a move when the buffalo passes the middle of the distance between them. He did not run in the face of a racing death. Leo charged as well. It was in this moment that we realized Leo never planned to target the weaker buffalo or juvenile. His plan was to have a duel against the strongest buffalo and kill it in a fair fight, she said, a plan so ridiculous that it never even crossed the human mind. And you know what? Sometimes nature rewards the bold. Later on, we would realize this was the perfect plan. At this point, the documentary entered a very intense sequence of the hunt. The battle between Leo and the buffalo unfolded like a clash between equal forces, unlike what everyone had predicted. The footage continued from the moment both began their charge. On one side, nearly a ton of hardened muscle barreled forward, hooves pounding the ground, horns aimed to skewer. On the other hand, Leo surged forward with no fear, only determination and focus. The buffalo dipped its head, horns angled low to catch Leo in its path. But Leo twisted to the side, utilizing the superior speed and reaction he had as a feline. His shoulder was clipped by the horn, but that was of no consequence. In the end, both passed each other. Leo stopped gracefully, but the buffalo continued running since it could not stop due to the sheer momentum. By the time the bull came to a stop, it was quite far away from the rest of the herd. Where the buffalo had raw power, Leo had control and intelligence, Hannah commented as the footage continued. Leo was the first to charge at the buffalo. It didn't matter who was stronger when one had courage. But Leo was not simply running towards the bull. He was running in an arc to make sure that he drove the buffalo further and further away from the rest of the herd. The strategy was clear when viewed from above. The viewers quickly realized the insane strategy that the lion was pulling without even having to be told. Leo was functioning with a mindset that he could absolutely take the bull in a one-on-one. His main goal was to separate the bachelor from the herd to make sure that no help came, Hannah commented. That would have been much harder had it been a female or a juvenile. But no one really cared that a grown bachelor was fighting a lion, so no one in the herd came to help, she said. Leo and the buffalo began clashing multiple times across the savannah. But it never became a full-blown fight, as Leo masterfully dodged and moved away from life-threatening attacks. Imagine Leo to be a matador. He is using the buffalo's weight and momentum against it, she said. Instead of brute force with brute force, Leo explored his speed advantage to gain an upper hand. Leo was constantly moving to drive the buffalo away, and yet he never once retreated. He stalked forward, keeping close to the buffalo's side, striking and leaping back, over and over. When the buffalo got tired and tried running back to the herd, Leo would jump on the back of the bull to get it more enraged. Once or twice, he nearly got caught by the buffalo, and he was sent into the air a few times, but he never lost the battle. And as the chase progressed, Leo got better and better at dealing with the brute force of the buffalo. The bull spun and kicked, but Leo stayed near its blind zone, just behind the horn curve, just outside the arc of its rage. It was an incredible sight. The perfect example of how the brain was as important as muscle in a fight. Hannah points out the way Leo rose from each blow, not staggered but steadied, as if each fall taught him something. New timing, new angle, new strategy. Until eventually, both parties were far enough from the herd that even the aerial footage showed no sign of other buffalo. And that was when the footage went silent. There was no longer any comment, no explanation from the narrator, nor any music or replay of actions. It was just raw footage with a filtered sound that made the viewers able to hear the rough breath of the buffalo and the calm beat of hooves on the ground. Leo stopped moving then, and he met the buffalo on equal ground. There was no longer any strategy or plan. It was just horns against teeth, claws against weight, and instinct against power. Nature's killing machine stood against nature's living tank. They charged at each other again and then collided. The buffalo thrust forward like an unstoppable force, and yet Leo latched onto the head of the buffalo like a persistent parasite. He bit and clawed. Sometimes at the eyes, sometimes at the neck, the muscle, and even the muzzle. The struggle was raw. Two animals fighting for life. It felt like each huff from the buffalo was a storm, each growl felt like a roar. Whatever primal instinct the humans had after centuries of comfort was activated and sent goosebumps. The buffalo pinned Leo down and raised the ground with his body. But the lion was stronger than any right he had to be. On the other hand, the bull was getting tired and exhausted. The silence in the footage was deafening, a void that made the scene more powerful than any narration could. Viewers leaned forward in their seats, held breath trapped in lungs, as the lion and buffalo fought in a space removed from the world. The two were in contact with no space between them. There was nothing left now but the struggle, the tug-of-war of life. It was the final act. From overhead, the drone footage showed the sheer vastness of the savanna surrounding them. Not a single other animal was within the frame. Dust rose in curtains around them, casting a haze across the orange ground as they struggled. Leo had latched onto the buffalo's face. His claws dug deep into the bull's shoulder to hold his position, while his jaws clamped hard just below the beast's eyes. The buffalo jerked violently, trying to throw Leo off, but with its strength waning from the extended battle, the lion stayed locked in. His body weight and train muscles were working in tandem to bring the beast down. Every twitch of the buffalo's movement, every attempt to shake him off, was another moment of exhaustion compounded. Then came the shift. Leo realigned his bite, working his way down to the buffalo's nose until he clamped the nostrils shut in an attempt to suffocate the prey. The buffalo let out a sound that didn't sound like anything due to the lack of air. More like a deep vibration. Its body bucked in a series of escalating panic responses. It stomped forward, shook its head, and sometimes pulled back. Some of those erratic actions worked. He crushed Leo's back leg with his hooves and made a cut with his horse, but Leo held on and absorbed every blow. He only increases the pressure. At last, the buffalo summoned his death strength. The body no longer cared about breaking down or tearing muscle fibers or tendons. It shot a surge of adrenaline for the final struggle. It managed to pull away from Leo, but at the cost of a disfigured face that looked so gory that it made even the adults uncomfortable. Leo's claws and fangs scarred flesh very, very badly. The buffalo screamed. Blood trailed into the dirt like a fountain. Leo staggered back for a moment while the buffalo stumbled in pain. He seemed to know exactly what to do next. He surged forward with surgical precision and attacked the leg of the buffalo. He clamped his jaws around the front leg of the buffalo. The ankle, just above the hoof, was unprotected. Viewers could hear the crack. A clean snap of bone and ligament. The bull immediately faltered, unable to support its weight. But as the bull began to collapse, it caught Leo with a desperate upward hook of its horn, lifting the lion briefly off the ground and tossing him like a rag doll. The impact wasn't deep. Leo's loose belly skin absorbed most of the damage, but the throw was brutal. However, there was no follow-up. Instead, the final dagger came. Leo dove into the unprotected belly of the buffalo while it collapsed on its side. The footage turned into a surreal flurry of muscle and motion. His claws tore through the exposed hide, and his fangs opened wounds that gushed like open valves. Blood fountained into the air, and the lion even pulled out the intestines. There was no music. Just the sounds of dying breaths, of tearing, of the buffalo's final bellows echoing, and the slurping sound of insides becoming outsides. The most brutal part was that Leo did not stop to rest or celebrate. He began eating right afterward. Everyone was speechless. Leo only stopped after he had eaten the organs. When he looked out again, his head was completely drenched in blood. His mane was slicked back, and that highlighted his expression of triumph. And so we witnessed a lone lion taking down a fully grown male buffalo by himself. It was the first recorded in history and might as well be the first that ever happened. Name: Dr. T. Somatansan. Role: lead researcher and ethologist. Nationality: Indian, from Nagaland, Northeast India. Age: 62. The camera showed a familiar face after the brutal scene ended. Dr. Tonson was sitting in a darkly lit room. The deep silence of the previous scene still lingered, but it was being forgotten as the screen lightened up. Something happened after Leo took down his first buffalo. He changed, and we noticed this gradually in the next 6 months until he became a completely different beast. The only thing I could compare this to is a teenager in adolescence experiencing a pivotal change in his life, he said in a solemn voice. There was no stopping him, he said. He began slaughtering the buffaloes. Perhaps he was searching for the high he got after he took down that bachelor. He began killing them even more often than he did his usual prey. The only thing that stopped him seemed to be the recovery he had to make after each hunt, he said and rubbed his hands together. But the better he got at hunting them, the more he did. At one point, it was no longer about food but more about sport and training himself. He was like a kid who learned to do something that he thought was really cool, and so he began doing that repeatedly, he said. Since buffalo are large animals, especially the bachelors that Leo hunted, the surplus that he had was of ridiculous proportions. At that point, he was not only feeding himself but every predator in the ecosystem during the dry season. Dr. Tonson said. The documentary showed multiple images of predators, ranging from leopards, jackals, wild dogs, honey badgers, cheetahs, and even the hyenas, all eating the remains of Leo's kills. In the span of half a year, Leo single-handedly took down 62 full-grown buffalo. His kill counts alone pushed the yearly buffalo death toll to 3 times the previous record. A record was set long ago when numerous lion prides still roamed the Serengeti, which was way before the reign of the 3 brothers. And Leo accomplished it alone with only 6 months of effort, he said. The documentary showed vultures thriving and swarming at a freshly killed buffalo, of which Leo only ate the organs and some muscles. The vultures had blood covering them and they looked fuller and bigger, and there was a phantom smile on their beaks. It was a bloody year, Dr. Tonson said. And then he shrugged with a carefree smile, not to worry, though, as 62 deaths did not leave a dent in the population of the buffalo. In fact, it was a much-needed population control, as the buffalo had been multiplying too much ever since the 3 brothers took over the whole of the territory and chased out all other prides, when lions were known to be the only predators to hunt buffalo. It was almost like nature gave birth to Leo to balance things out again. On the other side, the death rates of predators like wild dogs and jackals dying of starvation in that year also plummeted due to Leo, he said. By the 2nd and 3rd months, the birth rates of many known scavengers also increased, he continued. That's how nature is. One dies and the others live because of it. The images finally cut to proper footage. The camera panned over a female cheetah with cubs feasting on a rotten buffalo carcass. Her bones were once visible, but now they were padded with meat. The cheetah snarled briefly, not at a hyena, but at a black-maned shadow looming in the distance. Whether it was a good thing or a bad thing is an argument that can go on forever. But what is undeniable is that Leo forever made an impact on the ecosystem, he said. There was a brief pause as the documentary showed all the lives that survived because of Leo and all the deaths that were because of his overhunting. Now, speaking of changes, let's talk about the physical changes that happened to Leo over the months due to this lifestyle, Dr. Tonson said, and a smile slowly stretched his lips. A graphic showed the comparison of Leo's body over the months. From a big, muscular 250-kilogram lion to a behemoth, weighing 320 to 330 kilograms. Just looking at that before anything was said was already enough to blow the mind. Buffalo meat is dense. It contains significantly more muscle fiber and creatine-rich tissue than zebra or wildebeest. It's hard to digest, but once adapted, it builds muscle and promotes growth like a steroid drug, he said. His bones thickened. His frame grew wider. His mane darkened and spread further across his shoulders. And most importantly, his testosterone level spiked, he said. His testosterone level is unbelievable. We tested his T level using his urine and feces, which we collected as quickly as possible, he said and then paused. And then laughed. Which is gross and funny when I say it out loud, he admitted. But in the name of research, we did what we had to do. Anyways, we tested his testosterone level a few times, and in every case, it always surpassed 2000 ing/DL, and sometimes at near the 3000 mark. Which is completely insane when you realize that the average lion has around 300 ing/DL and lion kings and dominant kings range from 600 to 1000 ing/DL, Dr. Thompson said as the screen showed data for what he was saying. For better reference, Leo, during this stage of his life, had testosterone comparable to bodybuilders who are using as many steroids as they can, he said. I also want to mention that Leo had not reached 3 years during these tests, and we could not get a good urine or feces sample after he became 3 years old due to him becoming the king and using his urine to mark his territory. We can only estimate him to reach 5000 ing/DL in his prime, he said. Now, you must be wondering how Leo's testosterone is that high. There are many answers for this, genetic mutation, etc., but one of the reasons is this, he said. The documentary returned to footage of Leo wrestling a massive bachelor buffalo triple his size. The struggle lasted over 10 minutes, a brutal dance of blood and stamina. Each kill wasn't just a meal, it was a battle, Dr. Thompson said. And in mammals, frequent high-intensity battles flood the system with testosterone. So what does that translate to for a lion that hunts every 3 days at the least, he said. The documentary showed a montage of Leo hunting buffalo. A number was displayed on screen to show the experience he had under his belt with each hunt. From 4 kills, 8 kills, 15 kills, 30 kills, 47 kills, etc. And you could see that Leo's mane grew visibly darker with each hunt, and he also got more confident and better at hunting the buffalo. His increased testosterone was a huge advantage he had over any other animal on the planet. It helped him build muscle and recover insanely quickly, and it also gave him more explosive power in general, he said. But it also had a disadvantage, which is that Leo got more and more aggressive as he aged. The reason for his overhunting of buffalo could be attributed to this high testosterone level, and also, after 3 months had passed since his first buffalo, Leo began hunting another, powerful animal besides buffalo, Dr. Thompson said. Leo began hunting other lions too. The footage changed to show a scene of Leo, who had just finished hunting a buffalo and was now eating his hard-earned meal. But while he was eating, a roar echoed in the distance. That immediately earned his attention as he looked forward. A few minutes later, a rogue lion emerged from the forest and stood face to face with Leo. From the body language, you could tell that there was tension in the air, and both were aggressive towards each other. The foreigner's aim seems to be to fight Leo for the buffalo carcass. It began with this. The first time Leo ever encountered another rogue male, and the first time he faced a lion other than the 3 kings, Dr. Thompson said. Leo gave a warning. But the new lion did not heed them. In the end, Leo got up. The moment he did, there was silence as the viewers processed just how big Leo was when compared to other average lions. The battle was brief and honestly didn't even feel like a battle at all. The lion could not even put up a proper fight, as Leo ended his life by crushing his skull a few seconds after the fight started. And this was it. Leo was so much bigger now and so much stronger compared to his peers that whatever lion encountered him, their fate was almost always certain death, he said. The footage continued. This time it showed a montage of Leo fighting with other rogue lions during the past 3 months. It would be more correct to call them a slaughter instead of a fight because that was what they looked like. The dry season was a time when challengers moved to other territories to fight the kings. Resources are scarce and the dominant are at their weakest. The lion instinctively knew this, and this is the time when they are most violent, Dr. Thompson explained. The Serengeti was a vast territory with only one pride ruling everything. Naturally, the land received more rogue males and challenges than every other region in Africa. And Leo became the bogeyman for these foreigners, he said. One video showed a rogue male with a battered frame and old scars. A smart viewer could deduce that it was an old king from the past who got beaten by a challenger. But the lion was not past its prime, so it was looking to take over a new one. He ventured across the river, drawn by the scent of a fresh. There were signs that told him that he should not move forward and should turn back and run instead. The vultures circled in the sky, most life was running in the opposite direction and his old instinct screamed. But he moved forward all the same, driven by hunger and pride. He crossed the river slowly and warily while scanning the other side. The moment he climbed the embankment, it was already too late for him. Leo exploded out from the edge of the river. He was raw motion of muscle and teeth. The intruder could not run. He only had enough time to face the incoming enemy. 2 lions collide chest to chest with a sickening thud. The rogue digs in his claws, snarling, trying to gain footing, but Leo is a wall of flesh and fury. A swipe from Leo's foreleg knocks the rogue sideways, spraying blood and fur. He scrambled back up, growling, managing to bite Leo's shoulder, but it was like biting a tree trunk. Leo slams his head forward, skull crashing into the rogue's face, dazing him. In the same second, Leo lunged and bit deep into the rogue's spine just below the neck and shook violently. The rogue kicked frantically, his paws flailing in muddy water, but Leo didn't let go. He hauls the male backwards like a limp carcass, dragging him into the shallows. Blood mixes with river silt. The thrashing slows. Leo rises, still holding the rogue by the back, and delivers a final, brutal slam into a half-submerged rock. The body folds in on itself. Motionless. The water carries away fur and blood. Starving to death would have been better than trying to take Leo's kills. Other footage showed 2 coalition males, young and bold. They crept through the low grass, trying to hunt a small herd of wildebeest that were left behind in the dry season. They had a plan, and they were laser-focused on their own task. Perhaps that was why they didn't realize they were not only hunting but they were also being hunted by something else. A movement among the dried tall grass spooked them out of their focus. The smell was faint, but both felt the smell of another male. They had thought it was each other's scent, but the dark truth was that there was a third lion. Leo stood up and towered over the 2 lions that were crouched down and stalking. A short, intense battle took place after that. The herd of wildebeest fled immediately upon hearing the sound of lion roars and growls. The battle was amid the grasses, so it was hard to see what was going on, even for the viewers. The golden grass camouflaged them well. But barely a minute later, 1 lion walked away, leaving 2 corpses to bleed out among the grass. The footage showed another lion, but this time it was quite different. He was noticeably bigger than the others. The lion entered Leo's hunting grounds and territory. Not only that, the lion began roaring at once to announce his presence and rule over the land, which was unoccupied by the 3 brothers. Perhaps the lion thought that the territory was big enough for other prides to also exist. Even though he had not won his right, the lion began acting as king. A big mistake, as his roars were answered by another one. A bigger one, a louder one. If sound could make you run, this was it. But by the time the rogue heard the roar, it was too close. Leo emerged from a brush, towering and silent. The rogue flinched back. For all his size, Leo was so much bigger. But the challenger did not run. Instead, they circle each other in slow steps, both hulking, both ready. And the first clash was the end of the battle. At this point, Leo was not only strong but also experienced. If he had come to fight Leo 2 months earlier, he would have maybe lasted a full minute against the kinslayer. They collided, and the rogue folded. Leo clamped his jaw at the ear, tearing that off along with loose skin with 1 powerful tug. And on the ground, Leo wrestled the lion and began mauling him. He attacked the inner bellies and thighs. He tore the lion like paper, and the same voice that released bold roars screamed in pain and begged for help. In total, Leo killed 17 different lions in the span of 3 months, Dr. Thompson said solemnly. At this point, Leo had already crossed the 300-kilogram weight. Probably closer to 350 than 300 kilograms. He had experience under his belt. Even dominant kings that ruled their whole life did not have that many kills. And so he was ready to challenge the kings. Now, here's where things get really interesting, Dr. Thompson began. And this is where we go back to the partnership between Leo and the vultures. This is where the line between reality and fantasy blurred. It's hard to believe what we saw back then, and it is still hard to believe now after almost a decade, he said. A video played. It showed Leo walking in the open plains of the savannah. The footage was quite different from what was shown earlier due to the wetness and the greenery of the land. It shows that much time has passed since Leo hunted the buffalo. He also looked more built than ever before. Indeed, he was the strongest he had ever been, and the viewers could not help but think that the 3 kings of the Serengeti are kind of cooked. Even the people who argued against Leo due to watching the documentary on the 3 kings could not help but reconsider their opinion. The episode this time did not hold back to show just how violent and aggressive Leo was. The brutal footage of Leo taking down buffalo and the ease with which he mauled every lion he ever came across was still fresh in their minds. Some even actually pulled out their phones to delete the comments on certain videos. In the video, Leo walked into the territory of the 3 kings. A small map on one corner of the screen showed Leo's known territory and that of the three kings, while making Leo look like a small dot on the screen. And you could see clearly that Leo was already inside the occupied territory of the kings. Leo then proceeded to leave his scent upon the trees, and he began roaring to announce his presence. His echoing roar sounded tearing even through the footage. It was like the sheer vibration was trying to rip your head apart. Perhaps it was natural, or it was smartly directed, but the footage shook ever so slightly with each roar released across the savannah. It was a sound that the people would not forget, some might even have nightmares. Unlike what most would believe, Leo did not fight the three kings just yet after he declared war upon them, he said. Instead, what happened next was way more calculated and alarming. Now the footage cuts to a new scene with a herd of zebras. The video was taken from somewhere on the ground, so it was not an aerial shot. But even so, the camera clearly captured the lionesses that were stalking the zebras. The video continued as it showed the step-by-step process of what appeared to be a successful hunt. The lionesses flanked the zebras. The chasers were already behind and ready to explode. The hunt would begin at any time. But then... Awk! The ugly cry of an ugly bird ruined the perfect moment. Vultures flew down from the sky, their 10-foot wingspan rapidly flapping to produce a gust of wind that parted the tall grass, which the lions used to hide. That exposed their location to the zebras, who ran immediately upon seeing the predators. It was not just one vulture, either, but multiple that flew down. The lionesses, realizing what had just happened, got enraged and leapt at the birds, but they expertly dodged the lions. For scavengers that try to get chunks of meat from lions and almost always get attacked for it, they were experts at avoiding the lions. As you see on the video, the vultures who had formed an association with Leo began sabotaging the Serengeti pride in their hunt. This happened right after Leo invaded the land of the three kings and announced his challenge. So it could not have been a coincidence, he said. Now that begs the question, how did it happen? Were we supposed to believe that right after deciding to challenge the kings, the vultures would begin sabotaging the hunt of the pride? No. We firmly believe that this was either the vultures of Leo himself making a move to ensure victory over the three kings, he said. It was an advanced tactic of war that's only ever seen in one animal, and that is humans. We've seen something close to this with animals hoarding resources to reduce competition, but those were driven by instinct. But the sabotage of the pride this time showed a clear aim and specificity. If it was instinct, they would have done this ever since the start, not only after Leo decided to challenge the kings, he said. On the topic of instinct, what was really baffling was that the vultures were doing the sabotage. Vultures should pray that the lions get more kills instead, as that means more remains to scavenge. But no, they sided with Leo and worked for his benefit. This clearly showed the nature of their relationship and how Leo affected the ecosystem. His influence was already strong enough to suppress the primal instincts of certain animals, he said. And it did not end there. The video was green this time to show that it was taken during the night. A distinctive roar echoed through the savannah. Leo's roar seemed to be magnified by the silence of the night. His figure blurred through the trees and the bushes. He was constantly moving as he roared, making sure that it seemed like he was in every direction. It was a haunting scene with an even more haunting sound. Leo began harassing the Serengeti kings at night to ensure that his opponents never got a moment of rest. This really messed with the mental state of the kings, as they would run out in the middle of the night to hunt Leo, only to end up wasting energy as they could not find the culprit that was constantly on the move, he said. But if Leo was harassing them at night, didn't that mean he was just as tired as the kings? The doctor asked himself the question that was on the mind of the viewers, well. The video cut back to morning and you could see Leo sleeping peacefully and shamelessly under a shade. He slept like a baby with no care in the world whatsoever. It was like he had no enemies at all. The scene cuts to the three brothers, who were quickly making their way towards Leo. They had tracked him while he slept and now they were about to ambush him. But before anything happened, a vulture flew down and landed beside the slumbering lion. A few pecks woke the lion up and then Leo was on the move again. The vulture led him to a perfect escape route, which ensured that the kings did not find or stumble upon Leo. When they came to the same shade under which Leo was, he was already gone. The scent was strong and the warmth of a presence was still there, but they missed him. In a display of unbelievable coordination, the vulture helped Leo avoid the kings for as long as he wanted to. We've seen this before in the past, but during this period it was even more pronounced. Due to his ally in the sky, Leo was able to sleep anywhere and anytime, the doctor said. The documentary again played a few videos that showcased the teamwork and the intelligent coordination of two different beasts. It was to a point where it was almost impossible to come to a conclusion that they were connected by something, if not language. Two people from different continents would not work as well as they did. It's absolutely unbelievable, Dr. Tonson said with a shake of his head. There are so many things to be said from this alone. I think a different documentary is coming out that gives detailed information about the vultures and their service to Leo. So if anyone wants to know more about this, they can do so with that. But that will be all in this episode. In the end, everything boiled down to the final hunt that the three brothers ever had, he said. The video then cuts to the Serengeti Pride. Unlike different times, they moved in a large group and the three kings were leading them. Since the vultures sabotage them every time they try to hunt, they decided to target buffalo. An animal known to not fear lions even when they saw them walking up to them. The next part of the documentary showed the hunting sequence. The pride worked together to bring down one buffalo. This time, it looked real and plausible. It was a great struggle for the pride to take down one bachelor alone. Some lions even got hurt during the hunt, showing just how intense these could get and how dangerous the bull was. But everyone who watched this could not help but feel their heart getting heavier. They compared the pride hunting a buffalo to Leo hunting a buffalo by himself. Even in his first hunt, Leo did not struggle as much as they did. It was a great wake-up call. It clearly showed the viewers the gap between Leo and every other lion in existence. The tailless beast was just built differently. But ultimately, the pride managed to fell the giant near a lake. The lions celebrated with panting breaths. It was going to be a feast after a week of not having any meals due to the constant sabotage of the vultures. In their moment of triumph, in their moment of exhaustion. That was when Leo decided to strike. Dr. Tonson's voice played over the documentary. The video slowly panned away from the pride that was celebrating their victory over a buffalo carcass and focused on a lake. The space was empty, leaving the viewers wondering what they should be looking for. Until something emerged from the lake. And out he came from the lake, hiding his scent from his prey, striking when they were the most vulnerable. A beast with a superior mind and body. Nature's perfect killing machine, he said. There was a pause as the footage showed Leo coming out of the lake. Water dropped in thick rivulets as he made his way towards the three kings. The three kings never stood a chance. No other beast would ever stand a chance. The documentary entered one of those stages again where there was no music, narration, or edited parts. It was just raw footage with few, if any, cleanup cuts here and there. It showed the naked reality of nature without censoring or enhancing anything. It was the complete truth and the exact replay of what actually took place. And that it was so much more impactful than it had any right to be. The viewers mourned the kings even before the fight started. Leo did not pounce or charge at them like he usually did to an enemy. He walked towards them slowly, as if knowing he was an inevitable judgment to them. The buffalo carcass worked great because it was a trap. Not only were the three kings exhausted due to the hunt, but it also made them discard the act of running as an option altogether. Two primal instincts combined, the need to protect their kills and the pride to protect their crown as kings. Two instincts became a chain that made them not run even though they should have. Lord knows they should have run on sight. And when the fight finally happened, when all four beasts clashed with each other, it was worse than anyone ever thought. It just went to show that Leo would have won in any circumstances, regardless. All the preparation and all the tactics were just a way of making sure he would win. The battle was brutal. Many people, mostly women, could not bear to watch such magnificent beasts tearing each other apart. The men felt their blood boil watching the scene. Fear and awe worked to make an addictive feeling. It was another example of how man could never win against nature. The battle between those lions surpassed any action blockbuster in cinema history. One by one, Leo took them down. He did so with efficiency, with dominance and unapologetic burliness. His superior intelligence always shone during the fight. Like when he dragged Dexter into the lake so that he could kill him without the interference of his brothers. The battle between Snow and Leo was a much anticipated one. It was everything the people hoped it would be. They couldn't help but shout or scream upon witnessing that brutal clash between two of the biggest lions in recorded history. But that ended with a clear superior. And then, when it came to the final lion, the viewers could not help but feel pity for the lion. In less than 10 minutes, the fight was over, and the three lions that ruled over the Serengeti with dominance lay in broken corpses. Vultures flew in the hundreds in the sky. Their presence was more than ever before. Some of them flew down and began eating the corpse of the king. And then Leo took a breath. And roared. Harder than ever before, louder than ever heard before. His roar shook the land and brought about a new authority. The roar was so loud that it reached the limit of the mic and distorted the sound now and then. All animals fled, even the clouds seemed to flee as the rain stopped quickly upon his roar. Unchallenged. Unrivaled. The greatest nature ever seen. The scene continued until the end of the episode. It was a powerful and impactful moment that carved itself into the minds and hearts of the viewers. The researcher only had one comment before the screen went dark. And so, the whole Serengeti bowed to the new king. First POV. They should have never woken up the beast inside of me. What happened next was no longer my responsibility. It was entirely theirs. It was the consequence of their action. A week had passed since I took over the pride, and except for the first 2 days of the week, I was completely preoccupied with one thing. Mating. Planting seeds in the garden. Whatever you want to call it. I did that. I did a shit ton of it. Every waking moment other than hunting and eating, I spent on top of a female. Once I got a taste of that lionessy, I nearly lost my sanity to it. Which was completely understandable and justified. You wouldn't understand it unless you were a walking high testosterone beast with 5 or 6 females begging you to smash them every moment of the day. It was a miracle that I could hold myself back at all. More than once, I just wanted to die on top of one of the females. What a way to go that would be. But after 5 days of nothing but constant smashing, I felt some shards of sanity return to me. I also eventually got used to the attractive smell of the females in heat and learned to resist their seduction. Finally, I was back to my normal self. Something on your mind, my king? Callie, one of the younger and sexier females, asked with an inviting wag of her tail. She was crouching down in front of me, her womanhood right on my face. Her posture and that arc of her spine could not have made it easier to climb on top of her and hump her without any other care in the world. But I held strong. I've already promised myself not to indulge further in debauchery, and that was it. One thing that was bigger than my lust was my pride. Hunting. Hunting bigger prey is on my mind, I answer her while turning away. Not today, bitch. You aren't getting the glorious D, again already? She asked with a tilt of her head. But we just ate yesterday. Well, it's physically quite demanding keeping all the females satisfied. That requires lots of food, I said, and there was no lie. Believe it or not, it was more physically demanding to keep their females happy than it was to kill them Bali brothers. It began small, with 2 females, Lela and Nasha, previously Zuri, giving their purity to me. But after that, many other females decided to go into heat. It was likely a biological instinct to go into heat after a takeover and being in the presence of a new male, a new scent, and a new king. The fact that I was pleasing the 2 females to such an extent was also a factor in their going into heat. Even the mothers of a 1-year-old cub went into heat, and now, there were around 9 females that were ready to be bred anytime. Which might seem impossible for a lone male to handle, but truthfully, I could handle 20. I quickly realized that my physical blessing and size were not limited only to fighting and hunting. The only thing stopping me was time. I did not have time to mate the whole day, every day, even though I probably could. I also had other things to take care of. Although I wouldn't say the past 5 days were a waste either. Due to the activity, I had gotten a lot closer to the pride, and now you could barely feel that I was their new king. But the time for enjoyment was over. It was time to get back on the grind. Since I was already king, I set new goals to work towards. One goal was to strengthen the pride by training each individual member and adjusting their diet. Another goal I had was a more personal goal, and that was to hunt prey larger than a buffalo. It was not for food but more like a trophy and achievement. To make progress, I needed to set goals to achieve, and hunting bigger prey was the only viable option. I already hunted buffalo, so my next prey should be a giraffe, an eland, a hippopotamus, a rhino, and eventually an elephant. An impossible lineup of prey only a fool would hunt. But having that as a goal was better than having no goals at all. Impossible for you, maybe, but not for thee. You said something about hunting bigger prey? A mature female voice came from my side. I turned to see Amara closing the distance between us. I bowed my head gently to receive her affection. Her head rubbed against mine and she pushed herself against me as if trying to stick to my body. And then she lay down next to me, invading my personal space as much as she could. It was not just her but other females also gathered around me. They rubbed their head on my body before they lay down, making sure their body was always in contact with mine. They had just seen me reject a mating invitation, and that meant I needed no private space and could cuddle. Lions were extremely social animals, and cuddling together like this was part of everyday life. And as their new king, everyone wanted to cuddle and give me small affections. "You took down a bachelor just a few days ago by yourself," she said. The respect and admiration in her voice was so thick I could feel it tickle my pride. "Isn't that enough for you?" she asked. I still remember my last hunt. The shock and awe on their faces as I took down a fully grown male buffalo alone. Believe it or not, it was my best hunt yet, as I took down the bull with little to no strategy. I guess trying to impress my new females had given me strength. I just walked up to a bachelor that had wandered too far from the pride and took it down. Simple as that. I was getting better at wrestling them and also killing them. Buffalo are not the biggest animal in the savannah, are they? I said while responding briefly to the other female who was grooming my mane. I think her name was Nia. I was trying to remember their name, but I still made minor mistakes now and then. "So you are planning on hunting down an elephant?" she asked with a raised eyebrow. "Eventually," I said, but I could almost physically feel the weight of my own words. "Do you doubt me?" I asked again when I saw her staring into my eyes. "I wouldn't dare," she said quickly. "It's what surprises me so," she added. "I don't doubt you." Okay, those were dangerously sweet words. Lionesses had this way of digging into a lion's heart even if they wanted to stay strangers. Maybe that was just how nature designed them, to provide that comfort and love. Mentally, physically, and spiritually. While we were talking, my 4 other lionesses were cuddling me from all sides. They were softer than you would be willing to believe, and the frequent licks and grooming made the simple act of existing around them pleasurable. The feeling was worth dying for. "Did you know, Esh once hunted a hippopotamus with the kings before the old kings?" Nia commented from my side. "Did she?" I asked. By the kings before the old kings, they must mean the kings that ruled even before the Mbali brothers. So that was at least 4 years ago. "She did," Amora confirmed. "Oh well, where is she?" I asked for her and looked around. It didn't take long to find her lying under the shade of a tree on the hill. When she felt my gaze, she turned towards me. "Come here, Esh," I commanded, and she did so obediently. When she came near, I asked again, "They say you hunted a hippo before. Tell me about it, I am interested." Amora retreated from my side, her head resting on my back. Esh found a spot near my side and lay down there. She was one of the lionesses that fiercely opposed me in the beginning, so she was a bit timid. So I had to make her comfortable by making the first move and pressing my head on hers. She relaxed visibly and she pushed her face inside my mane for a few seconds before she came back out for air. And then she started telling the story. It was the dry season. The rivers had emptied into mud and it was one of those moments vital for a lion pride. A time of socializing. And for the moment, I indulged in the warmth of their presence. The fact that we were once enemies was slowly being forgotten. The truth that I killed the father of their cubs was fading away into irrelevance. And slowly, the pride was becoming what it was always meant to be. Not just a band of ready hunters and killers, but also a family. 1 month later. 3 years, 3 months old. I continued my usual hunting schedule, which was at least 1 prey every 3 days. But that didn't mean the rest of the pride was staying idle. Quite the opposite, actually, as I made them follow my schedule of hunting. I made sure every lioness in the pride participated in the hunt. The rotation of hunting groups made sense in terms of efficiency, but that was not what I wanted. Training in itself was the most inefficient activity by nature, so let's forget about that entirely. The point was, I wanted my lionesses to be sharp. I wanted them to be strong and agile. If I didn't do that, I'm afraid they would just get fat and lazy with the increase in their diet. I needed them to be strong for the upcoming war. I wouldn't return to the Pride Lands carrying baggage. I need real fighters behind me. I was not sure what Scar would have waiting for me, but I would prepare for whatever. On another note, I've implemented my idea of being a nomadic lion pride. We were constantly on the move, never sleeping more than 2 days in the same place. My kingdom was vast, and I wanted to make my presence known everywhere. I wouldn't allow some rogues to live peacefully in some corner of my territory like I once did. Nah, it was mine. I earned this, and I wouldn't share this. I could just select the region with the most resources and hunting ground and set up my pride there like the Mbali brothers did. But for some reason, the idea of others living and thriving in my kingdom pissed me off just thinking about it. Right now, we were no longer in my copy but somewhere in central Serengeti, and we were heading south. The savannah was entering the later parts of the long wet season, so there was green everywhere. The place we were staying was an open plain with small grasses. A herd of zebras has grazed here yesterday and the pride took down 2 and we feasted here. After that, we just used it as our place of stay for the day. I sat down in the middle of the pride. There were females around me, their smaller bodies snuggling mine through their number. The rest of the pride were all in my field of vision. The small cubs are playing at the edge of the group, always trying to sneak away every chance they get. The mothers kept an eye on them while trying to sleep during the task. My muscles ached just a bit from my hunt yesterday. But although it was physical pain, the feeling was comforting instead. It was a reminder that my body was developing and growing stronger. It was reassuring, at least for me. But the moment of peace did not last long, as the violent flapping of wings interrupted everyone's afternoon nap. Grim landed a few meters away from me. He stood upright upon landing and fixed his feathers a few times before he slowly made his way towards me. The lionesses moved away to make space for him and he eyed them with a superior look. As if saying, I was with the king before any of you. I am his best and most loyal subject. Y'all are just hoes and gold diggers. No, power diggers. Y'all serve any king. I serve only Leo, whether he is king or not. That might be a lot to tell from his eyes alone, but that's exactly what they say, believe it or not. Eventually, he stood before me, and after I gave him a nod, he began his report. 2 lions are a few kilometers ahead. They were in the act of leaving claw marks on the ground and leaving their scents the last time I saw them, he said, and that immediately got my ears to perk up. The lionesses who were sleeping also opened their eyes. The news was enough to wake them up from any drowsiness. And then suddenly, all eyes were on me. The females, including Grim himself, searched for a reaction from me. Was I angry? Was I frustrated? Was I scared? In the meantime, I tried my best to hide my excitement. A month had passed since I killed the Mbali brothers, and this would be my first ever challenge as the king. And the 2 lions a few kilometers ahead are my first challengers. Leaving their scents, I said thoughtfully and then smiled. Leaving scents in a king's territory meant that you were ready to fight them. It was a way of leaving a clue to the king on where to find you. So you could fight for the throne. Let them come, I said, and right then, I released a roar. It was not a particularly loud roar, nor was it threatening. It had the volume of the average roar and the rhythm was soft and gentle, as if I was asking the lions to come instead of telling them to leave. It was not a warning or a threat, it was a beacon. You think you can fight me? Then come. I roared 10 times towards the sky and stopped. That would be enough for the challenges to know my location. Call your birds, Grim. Tell them they have a cleanup job, I said, and Grim replied with a smirk before he took off back to the sky. In the meantime, the pride got ready for the fight. The lionesses got up and came towards me. They rubbed their heads on mine briefly as they walked past me. Slowly, everyone took their place behind me. I was no longer at the center of the pride, now they were all behind me. The place they consider to be the safest in the world. Which is my protection. On the other hand, I remained in my place with a relaxed posture. The curious cubs, who were dragged behind me by their mothers, came back running and stopped at my side. Are you going to fight my lord? One of the cubs asked. I looked down and saw that it was Aisha, a female cub who also happened to be a favorite of mine because she reminded me of Nala when she was a cub. Yes. Because apparently some punks think they could beat me, I said, and the cubs actually laughed at my reply. My relationship with the cubs was good, especially the females, since they would be part of the pride even after they were grown. They did not hate me for killing their father. Instead, they were grateful that I spared them. Their mothers taught them well. The winner is always right. It's not my fault but their own that the old kings died. In the first place, the relationship between a lion and its cubs was not like that of a mother. Unless they are the heir like Simba was, the kings could not care less for them. I entertained the cubs while I waited. A weird mix between playing with cats and a cute baby. In 10 minutes or so, they appeared at the end of the horizon like small shadows. I roared one final time, "Come. Run back to your mothers now, and do cheer for me," I said and chuckled. "Remember, you are all going to die if I lose." The cubs just laughed it off, as if they were certain that I would not lose this fight. Perhaps my brief clash with their mothers left a permanent scar on their young minds, seeing me as something invincible. The cubs followed my orders and clumsily ran back to their mother. The older one, not being the mature one, raced their younger siblings and won the race since they had better coordination. I turned my head and watched them with a smile. But the same smile disappeared when I turned back forward. And then my body came alive. Their stench pushed me to battle mode and I could feel my body tensing and ready to explode out from my sitting position. I released a hot breath and my heart drummed inside my chest. I did not move yet. Instead, I reigned in the excitement and the urge to explode out. I needed them to get closer so that they couldn't escape. I had no intention of leaving them alive. I was always more brutal than other lions, killing so many rogues in the past 3 months alone that I lost count. I was not going to stop the habit just because I became king. I heard whispers among the lionesses as the 2 challengers neared me. "They are big and fierce. And there are 2 of them. What are the chances of us losing the king so soon?" one lioness asked. Her tone held the tiniest worry. "The old kings were bigger and fiercer." "And they were 3, another lioness answered. It was Esh's voice. "I don't think we have anything to worry about." I smiled at the comment and by then, the 2 challengers were less than 10 meters away, so I stood up. They froze when I stood on all 4s. I did not know why, but these so-called rogues always underestimated just how big I was when I stood up. I was not only taller but I was also so much wider and thicker than they were. My mane came alive, no longer drooping down like normal hair but puffing out as a form of intimidation. The black mane was easily distinguished as a show of strength and high testosterone. By that point, vultures danced in the sky. After standing frozen for quite some time, they finally resolved their fear and took a step forward. But looking closely, you could see the pace was way shorter and more cautious. "It's too late for fear," I told them. They heard my comment and their pride made them sneer. But they did not bother to quicken their pace. When they were about 5 meters away, they spoke. "My name is Rondo," one of them said. This one had a thicker mane with dark ends. "And my name is Jabari," the other lion said. He was the bigger one but he was younger. His mane barely had dark in it, and his body was void of scars. "I don't care," I said, and then finally surged out like a flood. The 2 challengers flinched back briefly, but for what it's worth, they charged at me head-on. I was certain it must be terrifying to run towards me instead of away when I came at them full force. In just a few seconds, we met in the middle. If I had clashed with them, I knew they would fold, but I didn't do that. Instead, I killed my momentum briefly before we collided and just as I predicted, one of them lunged at me. But due to that small pause I made, his calculation went way off, and he lunged at the air. I roared out and swung my paws at the head. My accuracy was precise as I landed leanly on the face. My claws, more like ivory blades than something natural, tore the cheek and the muscle of the young lion's face. Red lines bleed out, and the force behind my attack knocked him out cold with one hit. His body flopped on the ground, more dead than alive. The other lion slammed his body at me. I took one step back but remained strong. I was a living mountain he could never hope to move. He pulled his head back, opened his jaw and then clamped down on my shoulder. In return, I flexed my shoulder and his jaw was unable to penetrate. His fangs failed to puncture, and he only left surface scratches that only went as deep as my skin. I did not fight back instantly. Instead, I wait as his arms wrap around my neck and his claws try digging into my thick, loose skin. He violently thrashed his head, trying to tear out chunks of my flesh. But they did nothing. In his attempt to draw blood, only a chilling truth bled out. He couldn't do shit to me even when given the chance. I made a move. I did not take into account his resistance because I easily shoved those away. I jerked my head and then bit him on his neck. My jaw clamped on skin, muscle, and mane, and I did not differentiate the three. I only clamped down harder and tighter. I exploded out and twisted my body. Then I proceeded to ragdoll the lion and slammed him down on the ground. His body crashed on the ground with a deep thud, and without giving him a chance to get back up, I mauled him right then and there. It was then that I really opened up the lion. His paws came out flailing with sharp claws, but I snapped at them and bit them off. It was instinct to move away from the claws, but once you ignored that instinct and bit, it was rather easy to bite off. Like fingers. His jaw opened wide with sharp fangs ready to defend. But my jaw opened even wider, and I bit at his muzzle and crushed his face. He was growling in protest, but a few seconds in, when I pulled his ribs out and his mane was everywhere but his face, he began screaming. At that point, the other lion woke up, and he slammed into my side. I paid him no mind as he tried biting and clawing at me. He managed some cuts and wounds, but not enough to warrant instant attention. Instead, I was completely focused on mauling the other lion. I only stopped when the screaming ended and there was blood everywhere. A deep silence filled the air when he stopped screaming. His friend was also shook and he stumbled away from me in disbelief. It was disbelief at his own powerlessness. I was killing his friend, perhaps his brother, but he couldn't do anything to stop me. Finally, I turned towards him. He continued moving back. There was some flesh and blood in my mouth, so I chewed it a few times before I spat it out, realizing they were lions. They didn't taste great. In fact, no predator tastes good. Baboons included. The lion finally ran after backing away for a few seconds. His fear grew bigger than his pride. Ever heard of the phrase, "Never run and show your back to a predator"? There was a reason for that. My instincts screamed upon seeing his fleeing body, and my body moved without a clear command. After realizing that I was chasing him, I did not bother stopping. He was fast and agile. Perhaps if this were a race, he would beat me. But in a burst of speed in short distances, no creature in the savannah could compete with me. I accelerated fast, reaching my top speed before he did, even though he ran first. And then I jumped on his back. His body collapsed under my weight. His belly and face were dragged through the earth before we came to a stop. "You could have died while fighting. Instead, you chose to die in disgrace," I commented before I ended his life by crushing the back of his skull. With a bloody mouth and a mane that looked red instead of black, I looked to the sky and released a victorious roar. I am king. And that will remain true for a very long time. All challengers are warned. 1 month later. 3 years, 4 months old. 2 months have passed since I took over the pride, and things have fully settled into normalcy. Even the ghost of the old kings was gone now. Their name had not been mentioned for weeks at this point. All the females carried my scent and my seed, with no remnants of the old king to be found in their bodies or minds. Their previous rule and management were forgotten as I changed many things inside the pride. From the hierarchy, the favorites, the hunting style, the hunting schedule, and even the way of living. The pride was not only mine, but it had been molded in my image and in my liking. And the cubs, the last legacy left by the old kings, had also forgotten about them. Their admiration was all on me, and I stood as their idol. It was my legacy that they wanted to be a part of, not dead kings. "When I was your age, I fought with a leopard and won," I said to the cubs that gathered around me. There were a total of 10 of them. 6 of them were around 8 months old now, and the other 4 were nearing their subadult stage. There were 3 males among them, 2 from the 8-month-old batch and 1 from the older group. "Your age is not an excuse to stay mediocre. You have to start now if you want to grow up like me," I said with a wise nod. Was it weird that I liked interacting with the cubs? They were so innocent and pure, unlike nature, which was cruel and unforgiving. They would also be the last batch of cubs for a while, so I wanted to spend time with them while they still retained their innocence. After long consideration, I have decided not to have any cubs as of now. Until I took back the Pride Lands, the young would only be a vulnerable weakness rather than joy. You might question how I was going to avoid having a cub when I had such a sexual lifestyle, but the answer was in our biology. Lions had a very low fertility rate. To impregnate one female in heat, lions had to mate for as many as 50 times a day for a week straight. So if you were not actively trying, it was almost impossible to have a cub. I was also only 3 years old, meaning I was still not fully mature sexually as I should be. These days, I avoid impregnating a female by cycling through them. There were many eligible females, so I would pick a few of them and mate with them before quickly moving on to other females the next day. This ensures that no female gets a chance to become pregnant. That was the strategy one came up with after finding out that I had a horrible pull-out game, and in the times that I did pull out, the females became pretty mad. Something about wanting my essence inside them, and that was the whole point of mating. Yes, it seemed only cream pies were accepted among lion society. Not complaining, though. But how? How did you fight a leopard when you were a cub? Were you not weak and small like us? One of them asked. I was, but it's not just about size when it comes to a fight. Otherwise, how could I take down a buffalo alone when they are triple my weight? I said, teaching them. But it was a very difficult fight nonetheless. I lost my tail in that fight, while I took an eye from the leopard, I said, and the cub zooed at the story. It kinda reminds me of the time I would tell this to other cubs when I was young. They would never get tired of hearing it back then as well. I lost my tail to the leopard, and that was one of the worst things that happened in my life. So I do not want to hear about someone trying to cut off their tail to be like me again. Is that understood? I asked, to which the cubs nodded. Some looked down in knowing shame. Yeah, that actually happened a few times, and their mothers complained to me. It was equally hilarious and concerning when I first heard it. Then what can I do to be like you? Another voice came. This one had a hint of maturity. It was not a deep voice yet, but it was getting there. I turned towards the male cub who was nearing his subadult stage. Zale was his name. He looked me dead in the eye and waited for my answer. I would say he was the one I liked the least. He did not have the charm of a young cub when I first met him, and right now, there was a spark in his eyes. A budding pride. But I smiled all the same. Give yourself to activity. The more you use your body, the stronger it will get. Learn how to move, learn how to run, learn how to hunt, and learn how to fight. Again and again until you no longer want to do it. Then do some more. Also eat as much as you can, and sleep as much as you can, I said, and my eyes were locked on his the whole time. He gave a thankful nod before looking away with thoughtful eyes. I, too, focused back on the younger cubs who were jumping excitedly, for I had revealed my secrets to them. I chuckled, knowing was one thing, but putting those into action was another. A lot know what they should do, but still die without doing. I entertained the cubs some more after that. We had a funny duel as well, where it was my paw against 6 of them. It was a good time to pass while I waited for news from the lionesses. All of whom were nowhere to be found at the moment, because they were all out hunting. It's why I am babysitting in the first place. I separated them into 2 groups. On one side, we have the older lionesses and the younger ones who were not expert hunters yet. So they were out hunting normal prey. There were 8 of them in total. On the other hand, we have the prime lionesses. They were great hunters with 100% success rate ever since they learned to work with the vultures as well. But I did not send them to hunt any normal prey. They were out hunting a buffalo. There were 10 of them in total. I heard the sound of faint roars and growls in the distance. From the sound alone, you could hear that the females were struggling greatly. But the fact that I could hear them means they were at least successful in executing the initial plan, which was to lead the target buffalo away from the rest of the herd. They've seen me hunt a buffalo alone numerous times, so they knew what to do, and the question is, could they do it? A few minutes after hearing that, I saw Grim flying towards me from a distance. I told the cubs to move away and that I had work to do, and they followed my orders obediently. So, I asked Grim when he landed beside me in a flap of wings. They were nearly successful. But then the buffalo realized they weren't you, so they ganged up on them, he said, and I shook my head with a sigh. What's going on right now? I asked again. 2 bachelors are going after them, neither being their initial target, so they are uninjured. The pride is leading them to you, he said. Oh, so that's why I heard them. Not because they were successful, but because they were running towards me for help, I said, and couldn't help but chuckle. Well, hunting a buffalo was not easy after all. Any deaths? None, Grim answered quickly. At least no one died. That's good. What doesn't kill them would only teach them. Perhaps they would have more luck next time. Help them bring the buffaloes to me, I said, and Grim flew out into the sky once more. In the meantime, I got up and began stretching as a warm-up. My muscles were tight, so I loosened them while I waited. With the guidance of Grim, it didn't take long for the lionesses and the buffaloes to appear on the horizon. The lions were taking turns slowing down the buffaloes while they ran. A few lionesses would latch themselves onto the bulls while the others ran. and then they would switch, and the cycle repeated. But the moment they saw me in the distance, all of them stopped fighting and they came running towards me. The buffaloes bellowed and began stampeding right behind them. When they were not slowed down, they could gather momentum, so they were moving behind the pride like unstoppable forces of nature. But the lionesses were much faster, so they were in no danger. They quickly reached me and ran past me one by one. They slowed down when they passed me because they knew the danger ended from there. On the other hand, I slowly walked forward. In just a few seconds, all 10 lionesses ran past me, and it was just me and the raging bulls. I did not have to do anything. When the short-sighted eyes of the buffalo finally saw me, they panicked and came to a stop. Their legs went stiff, and they slid on the ground, shoving up dirt in their attempt to slow down. They stopped around 25 meters away. I stopped as well. For a moment, we had a stare down. The buffaloes bellowed into the air, their noses releasing smoke while they ground lines on the earth with their hooves. I released a low growl and then walked up to them. This time, my body was ready to explode. It was not a simple stride, more like I was stalking them in plain sight. That was a clear tell that I was not going to let them go. In a fight or flight situation, buffalo always fight. So one of them shook his giant head with its deadly horns before charging at me. I shot out right then as well, not away but straight at the bull. Buffalo hunting 101, never allow a buffalo to gain momentum. I closed the distance between us in a heartbeat. But I was light on my paws when I neared the buffalo, because trying to meet the living tank with brute force was courting death. Literally. Another lesson, buffalo has a very linear force of power. If you step out of their path, you can avoid any danger. The tricky part here was confidence and calm in the face of death. And I had that in spades after hunting close to 100 buffalo. I stepped to the side at the very last second, my feline reaction in full display. I latched my claws at the side of his face so I tore a line while I dodged to the side. The buffalo felt the pain, and he turned his head to avoid getting more damage from my claw. Coupled with his instinctual urge to jerk his head towards me, there was a sudden change in the direction of his momentum. I slammed my paw at the side of his shoulder and that was the final blow. The buffalo released a scream as he lost balance and he had a mighty crash on the ground. His behemoth body shoved away dirt upon his fall. I reacted immediately. My jaw opened and I lunged, not at his neck, but at his legs. With my trained jaw that surpassed the bite force of any other big cat, I easily broke the thin bone of the buffalo. His bone was made to hold up his huge weight, but a crushing force from the side easily snapped it. It was like spaghetti. There was a roar of agony and then I immediately pulled away. Right then, the other buffalo came in charging at me but he missed completely. His attack instead landed on his fallen friend. He quickly realized his mistake and turned to me. But in doing so, he stomped a few times at his friends. Truly a definition of stupidity and power, I commented. The jokes about bulls being dumb and having a small brain were absolutely true. The bull again charged at me and I closed the distance again. This time, the bull barely got to start, so he barely had any force behind him. But that also caused him to be able to balance himself better. I latched onto the head of the buffalo, my hind legs creating lines as the bull surged forward. Another thing was that buffalo were not all that scary when you knew what you were doing. He was more powerful than me, but I was also not some predator he could ragdoll at this point. The advantage I had in wrestling was that I could stand on my hind legs and use my front to grapple. On the other hand, the buffalo could only move forward with no hands. And when you were aware of those advantages and used them, suddenly it was not so difficult to take down the beast. A bellowing moo, and then the buffalo crashed to the ground. I immediately mounted him and clamped down on his mouth and nose. My jaw dug into his skull and I began suffocating him. I held him down with my weight. He was lying sideways so there was no way for it to stand up. His neck muscle was strong, but not something that could help him escape. He thrashed around violently but I controlled him. He choked on his own blood that was in my mouth. His resistance only made him suffocate quicker and before 2 minutes passed, the buffalo was out cold. After I was done, I walked back to the other buffalo. With the injured leg, he could not get up. He was surrounded by the lionesses again and they were successful in taking it out this time. I guess it was going to be another feast with these two bachelors. Third POV. Pride Lands. The sky was the color of old bone, and the wind carried dust now. It was not too much, just a hint, but there was a whisper of dryness that clung to Nala's fur as she padded across the savannah. She looked around at her home, vastly different from what she remembered before. It was like she was walking into a new place, a new region, even though she never left. The grass was still green, but thinner, sparser, and brittle at the edges. The countless trees on the horizon hadn't yet dropped their leaves, but they swayed less with life. Actually, their swaying looked more like tired groans. And beneath it all, the ground felt harder than it should have. It was no longer that soft, wet soil that could support any vegetation. Now they were only worth shrubs and sharp grasses. The drought that was seen in the movies was upon them. And this was only the beginning. The future was not kind to the kingdom of Pridelands. Most animals were leaving, more had already left. Nala continued walking through the open plain until a shadow was cast over her. She looked up and saw the Pride Rock looming in the distance. The setting sun gave the old rock a giant shadow. But as Nala continued walking towards that structure, she felt no warmth or a sense of home. Quite the opposite actually, as she felt her skin crawl when she walked closer. The shadows had eyes. Hyenas. They were everywhere now. No longer confined to the outskirts of the kingdom, they strutted across the plains like they belonged there. Not only did they reproduce quickly, but they also multiplied because other hyena clans were joining in from outside. The number of hyenas was no longer comparable to what it should be, or the number they were in the movies. They were twice, no, easily triple as much. All because of a certain lion and his promise to return in 2 years. Scar was scared. He would kill anyone who says that out loud, but his actions were screaming it. He was preparing, in any way he could, for the return of the lion he feared. You could see it in the way that he was not limiting the hyenas and let them roam around freely and multiply. You could see it in his desperation to produce cubs and get the lionesses on his side. You could see it in the way he trained his own body, imitating what Leo was doing when he was still in the Pride. Scar was doing everything to protect what he got but did not deserve. The crown. Nala observed all of this with great rebellion in her eyes. Her mind was in a constant state of worrying and thinking. Oftentimes, she felt like she was the only one who cared, the others seemed to resign to their fate already. She tried not to pay any attention to the clan of hyenas chewing on old bones and loitering around the Pride Rock like unwanted weeds. But it was hard when they welcomed her with laughs and ugly snickers. The hyenas were not yet allowed on the Pride Rocks, but they were pushing their boundaries each day. She couldn't help but spite once again in her mind. The scavengers were clearing, growing out of control. At this point, it was not them but Scar who was loyal. The dynamic in their power was subtly shifting. After all, if the hyenas decided to take over the whole kingdom, they could do so any day now. Nala climbed up the rocky hill with practiced ease and flexibility. In just a few seconds, she reached the entrance of the den and had moved away from the hyenas. She entered, and only a quiet stillness greeted her. It seemed life and joy were simply sucked out of the Pride Rock. Again, she couldn't help but reminisce about how lively the Pride was when Mufasa was still the king. If only she were a lion too, maybe she could overthrow the king and restore the realm as it once was. Hey, Zuri's voice came from the corner. Nala looked towards the voice and noticed Zuri lying amid a small group of lionesses. Most of the Pride had gone out to hunt, Scar included. "You're back early," Zuri said. "Did you find anything interesting?" "It is precisely because I did not find anything of interest that I returned early," Nala answered while walking towards them. She rubbed her head against Zuri's to show affection before she lay down next to her. She curled her thinning frame between other lionesses and sought out any remaining warmth from the Pride. When she was in a comfortable position, she continued, "Forget about interesting things, there's barely anything out there anymore." "You didn't find other animals?" Zuri asked. Nala shook her head. "Nothing," she said. "Not a single herd. Not even birds. They either all moved towards the edge of the kingdom or outright left." "That's concerning. I thought there were a few herds left at least," Zuri said, her amber eyes staring outside the den. "It seems each day is worse than the last," she said. "Soon we'll be hunting insects." The other lionesses did not speak, but they shared her concern. They nod their heads solemnly and get lost in their own mind. "Well, good thing we have an expert insect hunter," Nala said with a smile, finally cracking a joke. "Oh, please," Zuri shared her smile, remembering when they would hunt insects as cubs. It was Simba who first hunted the insects. The group of lionesses spent the time together, cherishing the last warmth and the pride. But as the sun finally set on the horizon and night began, their peace was disturbed by a roar. "Scar has returned," Zuri said, and it seemed he at least caught something. Not long after, the rest of the lionesses that went hunting with Scar returned to the den. They had blood in their mouth, which they licked now and then. Their bellies were bloated to show they were full, unlike the starving many that remained inside the den. The ones who went hunting were Scar's favorites. The ones that had a rebellious spirit were rarely invited to hunt by the king and therefore, rarely got a chance to eat a full meal. Nala glared at her own mother, Serafina, when she entered. It still struck her just how easily those older lions bend to new rules. Personally, Nala felt betrayed. On the other hand, Zuri understood them and realized they were just adapting to survive. She barely spared a glance at Sarabi when she entered. All the lionesses returned. The pride was split into two groups, one that went hunting and came back with a full belly and the other that remained. Scar himself had not returned. Instead, he chose to enjoy the kill at the peak of Pride Rock like he usually did. The members settled and cuddled together for the night. But just before Nala fell asleep, she heard the king call her name. She perked up immediately. Zuri followed her. Both of them were on full alert because it was not common that the king would summon either of them. "What do you think he wants?" Nala asked. "I don't know," Zuri replied. "Don't go." But the king was persistent as he called her name again and again. In the end, the king was insistent and Nala decided to heed her summons before the king got angry. "I'll be right back," she said and left the den. Outside, she saw Scar sitting down at the end of the Pride Rock's peak. Before him was a half-eaten impala, which was probably one of their kills in the afternoon. "Nala," Scar said while turning his head but not looking. "Join me." It was weird. Nala could not put into words how weird it was for the king to invite her like this. But nevertheless, she walked up the rock and stopped before him. Scar stood up and moved away. He gestured at her to sit where he previously sat and she obeyed his command. "Eat," Scar said. She didn't want to eat just because he said so. But she was starved and with meat right in front of her face, she couldn't hold back and she began eating. Scar released a contented hum before he walked around her in circles. He studied her body closely while Nala fed on the kill. "I still remember when you were just a cub, so stubborn and adventurous," Scar began in a deep voice. "Look how much you've grown now." Full-grown and ripe, he put his paw on her back and gently clawed the curve of her spine. His touch made her stand on end. "You are ready to accept your king," he said and finally stopped behind her. He positioned himself above her and was ready to mount her. So that's what he wanted, Nala thought in her mind while swallowing a big piece. There was no panic in her eyes, and she didn't look surprised. Scar took in her feminine scent like someone doing coke. The aroma might be just as addictive for a lion. Young and fertile. He grunted and was just about to mount before Nala suddenly turned under him. She growled in protest, her teeth bared. Her hind legs kicked, and her claws raked from his underbelly till the end. The king screamed. Nala roared, "No!"
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.